Chapter 4988. In any case, there would always be a chance for them to meet in the future. There was no hurry. Qi Liren made up her mind and warned Xiao Ju, "You always like to blabber. If you go to His Majesty, you're not allowed to speak carelessly." Xiao Ju stuck out her tongue and hurriedly nodded, indicating that she definitely wouldn't speak carelessly. The master and servant duo hadn't walked far along the palace wall when they saw Wu Rum, dressed in a red robe with short sleeves. She was riding a large dog that was half the height of a person and was currently running towards them. Xiao Ju cried out in alarm and hurriedly stood in front of her miss. Her small face was ashen and then white as she shrieked, What are you doing?" Wu Rume hurriedly tightened the noose around the dog's neck and uttered a shoo. The large dog stuck out its tongue and panted heavily before stopping in front of the master and servant duo. Qi Liren took several steps back, her pretty face changing slightly. Wu Rume was too outrageous. How could she ride a large dog and run amok in the imperial palace's inner court? Relying on His Majesty's trust in her father, she was so impudent. She simply didn't have the slightest bit of etiquette and demeanor of a noble family's young miss. Outrageous. Seeing that it was Qi Liren, Wu Rume hurriedly smiled and said, "I didn't scare Miss Qi, did I? Miss Wu, this dog of yours?" "Oh, this large dog. I bought it the day before yesterday when I was visiting a newly opened spirit beast garden. Doesn't it look very majestic and domineering?" Wu Rume smiled and patted the dog's head. "I really like it too much." Hearing this, Qi Liren couldn't help but inwardly roll her eyes. Like hell I'd believe you. She didn't even know if half of this Miss Wu's 3 sentences were true. Not to mention that there had never been a spirit beast garden at the foot of the imperial palace. Even if there was one, a person could only form a contract with one beast in their lifetime. Wu Ruome already had a spirit beast by her side, so it definitely wasn't this large dog. It was also impossible to say that she only treated this large dog as a mount. This large dog was clearly a low-level spirit dog. Logically speaking, a beast that had already developed intelligence definitely wouldn't sully itself as a mount. Miss Wu swiftly jumped to the ground and cupped her hands towards the green-faced Miss Qi. She said with a forthright smile, "Miss Qi, you aren't angry, right? I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't hit you, did I? Don't touch our young miss." Xiao Ju was like a mother hen protecting her chicks. She hurriedly stood in front of third young lady with her chest puffed out, as if Miss Wu's outstretched left hand was infected with some sort of virus. She had a look of disdain on her face. Wu Ruome was rebuffed. Embarrassed, she retracted her hand and coughed. "Then if there's nothing else, I'll go first." Since others already despised her so much, there was no need for her to suck up to them and befriend them, right? She Wu had her own backbone of. Qi Liren rolled her eyes and suddenly said, "Miss Wu, you were riding a dog and running around in the inner court. It's not a big deal if you bumped into me. But if you offend that noble crown princess, I'm afraid His Majesty will be the first to punish you." Wu Ruome was stunned. She quickly turned around to look at Qi Liren. All right. "I heard from my father that the crown princess of Shenzhou is here, right? Then I really have to meet her properly." Qi Liren frowned. Wu Ruome's reaction was somewhat different from what she had expected. It seemed that this woman was rather shrewd. Chapter 4989. Miss. A skinny servant girl carrying a quiver of arrows on her back chased after her, almost bumping into Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju exclaimed and hurriedly pushed her away. "How dare you? What's wrong with you, little girl? How dare you bump into my miss so recklessly?" Although this servant girl's body was skinny, her strength wasn't small. She didn't budge at all after being pushed by Xiao Ju. Dully, Wu Ruome hurriedly pulled the servant girl to her side. "Didn't I tell you to slow down? I'm very familiar with this place, Miss Wu." Qi Liren frowned and said in a low voice, "This is the inner court of the imperial palace. It's not like our ordinary household. It's really inappropriate for you to allow your servant girl to run around and yell at the palace walls. It's better to teach her more on a daily basis." Wu Rume turned her head to look, only to see Qi Liren leave with Xiao Ju and her servant girl after leaving these lecturing words. So serious. The maidservant beside young Miss Wu curled her lips and said. Her voice was neither loud nor soft, just enough to fall into the ears of the master and servant who were leaving. Miss, Prime Minister Wu's daughter is too rude. Even the servant girl beside her is unbearably vulgar. She has a good life. Prime Minister Wu had always regarded this daughter as the apple of his eye. Now that the Prime Minister was highly valued by His Majesty and had a meteoric rise, the entire Prime Minister's estate would rise with him. Miss Wu's impetuous temperament. Do you think she'll have a conflict with that person? Qi Li Ren pursed her lips, a faint smile appearing on her lips. It's hard to say. However, thinking of Wu Ruamei's strange reaction just now, Qi Li Ren couldn't help but frown again. Let's wait and see on the other side. Wu Ruamei rode the big dog to the vicinity of the garden. She hurriedly put away the big dog and quickly ran towards the pavilion. Before she could get close, she was stopped by a few palace servants. Shu, lower your voice. Wu Ruamei couldn't help but lower her voice, her eyes darting towards the pavilion. The crown princess is resting there? The palace servants nodded in unison. Although they hadn't taken care of the crown princess for long, the little crown princess's temperament seemed to be very easy to control. She liked peace and quiet. Don't provoke her for no reason. Even if you did, don't provoke her too much. Otherwise, once she retaliated, there was a 99% chance that you would die. For example, yesterday, there was a courting palace maid who poisoned the little crown princess. The first 2 times, the little crown princess ignored her, but the 3rd time, she smacked her to death. Even her family was executed by His Majesty in a fit of anger. She was really unlucky. Now, His Majesty wanted to investigate further to find out who was the one who could not tolerate the little crown princess. I reckon that another batch of people will die if they find out. Wu Ruamei giggled and said, Hey, I'll sneak over. I won't disturb her, and I won't make things difficult for you, okay? No, Miss Wu. A palace maid hurriedly waved her hand and said, If the little crown princess is woken up by someone, she will be angry for the whole afternoon. The corner of Wu Ruamei's mouth twitched. Then I'll wait for her here. Hey, bring me a chair. I'll sit here for a while and wait for her to wake up. The palace servants looked at her speechlessly. In the end, they couldn't dissuade the Prime Minister's daughter. They brought her an old-fashioned wooden armchair and placed it opposite the pavilion. Miss Wu sat down on the old-fashioned wooden armchair with a golden knife. Unfortunately, this was a shady place, and there was always a chilly wind blowing behind her neck. It was really not as good as the little crown princess pavilion. It was sunny and warm, and there were curtains hanging around to block the wind. Chapter 4990. Wu Ruamei sat there for more than 2 hours and sneezed several times in a row. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the royal servants who rushed up to cover her nose. The young crown princess didn't wake up until the end of the afternoon. At that time, the sun was gradually setting in the west, but the sunlight inside the pavilion had also dimmed considerably. Wu Ruamei quickly jumped up and moved her frozen hands and feet. She was truly miserable. After sitting here, those junior royal servants had been squatting around her. Whenever she made the slightest noise, someone would immediately come up to cover her mouth, cough. Yuan Zhen coughed and bowed to whisper, Crown Princess, are you awake? The young Crown Prince Consort was a little confused. She flipped over and sat down on the couch, a hint of bewilderment on her face. Yuan Zhen's mouth twitched. According to her understanding of the young Crown Princess, it would take about 7 to 8 minutes for the Crown Princess to return to her senses. Arbor yawned and looked up at Yuan Zhen. Why hasn't Duan Yu returned yet? His Majesty is receiving the envoys from the barbarian tribes today, so he might come back a bit later. The young Crown Princess weakly replied with an "oh" and rubbed her stomach. Unexpectedly, when he raised his eyes, he saw a young girl dressed in a red robe with short sleeves tied up. She had an excited look on her face as she ran and hopped in front of him. You're that Crown Princess of the Divine Province, right? Wu Ruamei reflexively wiped her hands on her gown and excitedly shook Arbor's hands. I was fortunate enough to see you up close. Sure enough, you're identical to the person in the painting. Fakes don't have half of your charm. Arbor blinked and looked down at her little paws that were being held. She asked expressionlessly, "Who are you?" Yuanzhen couldn't help but facepalm and hastily stepped forward to introduce. "Crown Princess, this is Prime Minister Wu's daughter, Miss Wu Ruomei." Arbor had heard of Prime Minister Wu's name before. As Duan Yu's right and left arm, a trusted aide, he should naturally be a good person. The young crown princess raised her eyebrows and understood the meaning behind Wu Ruomei's words. "You've seen imitations before?" "That's right. Not long ago, there was a fake mixed in with the messengers from the kingdom of Daluo. You didn't see that woman. She's really ugly. Her fake face made me want to vomit." The young crown princess moved to the side, and Wu Ruomei very naturally sat down next to her. The two of them started chatting like this. Yuanzhen was speechless. Although they were chatting, it seemed like Miss Wu was the only one chattering nonstop. From the many countries where the fake Luo came to visit His Majesty, to how His Majesty searched the entire city for the 3 state teachers, to how His Majesty received the news and chased after Wang Chuan. The young crown prince consort sat there and listened the entire time as she spoke vividly and vividly. When Duan Yu came over in the evening, he saw the two of them chatting while sitting side by side on a couch. How strange. Jojo didn't get along with just anyone. Duan Yu raised his eyebrows and allowed the palace servants to roll up the pavilion's curtain for him. He slowly walked in with a smile in his eyes. Arbor asked when he saw him enter, "Duan Yu, are you done?" "I chatted with little Maisie the entire afternoon and almost finished the pastries." Aunt Yuanzhen couldn't help rolling her eyes. The crown princess's "Oh, is that so?" didn't exceed 20 words, and she even said that she chatted with someone the entire afternoon. What a joke. Duan Yu's gloomy mood instantly brightened, and he quickly walked up. Chapter 4991. Don't eat so many pastries. It'll be dinner soon, Duan Yu said with a chuckle. Every time Jojo was gluttonous, she would reveal an expression of, "This thing is just so," or, "I only eat a bit occasionally." Her earnest little face looked comical. She was clearly a foodie, yet she was unwilling to admit it. Arbor looked down at the pastry she was holding and then glanced at the disapproving Duan Yu. She silently tossed the pastry onto the plate and retracted her paw to pat off the pastry crumbs on her fingers. "I didn't eat much." Crown Prince Consort, you ate several pieces of pastries while listening to Miss Wu's story. Aunt Yuanzhen hurriedly said, "This servant has already reminded you 3 times. If you eat too much, you won't be able to eat dinner and will easily suffer from indigestion." The little crown princess glared at this person who was undermining her and then angrily checked her pulse. "I'm very well." Duan Yu curled his lips and couldn't help laughing when he saw her small movements. His gaze swept over Wu Ruomei, and she hastily bowed and said, "Your Majesty, Ruomei should return home for dinner, so I'll take my leave first." Duan Yu nodded indifferently. Wu Ruomei had just turned around and walked 2 steps when she suddenly turned around and ran up to Qiao Mu in high spirits again. "Crown Prince Consort, tomorrow's weather is pretty good. How about we go for a walk together? I want to hear the Crown Princess talk about my idol, Commandery Princess Wushuang. I heard that Commandery Princess Wushuang established a tiger wolf battalion that is especially invincible and incomparably powerful." Duan Yu expressionlessly looked at this Miss Wu. This fellow opened her mouth and seemed to want to continue chatting with Jojo on the side, so Jojo nodded repeatedly like a chick pecking at rice. When she heard Wu Ruomei talk about Commandery Princess Wushuang, she also hummed several times in agreement. Duan Yu was speechless and quietly asked Aunt Yuanzhen, who was standing on the side, "The crown princess has been chatting with Miss Wu like this entire afternoon?" Yuanzhen nodded decisively. He stretched out his palms and flipped them back and forth. "It definitely won't exceed 20 words. Miss Wu has made 3 pots of tea. This servant thinks that she won't be able to eat dinner." Duan Yu's mouth twitched. Escort Miss Wu out? Wasn't he a chatterbox? When he thought of this, Duan Yu couldn't help but grit his teeth. He had miscalculated to the extreme. In fact, it was easy for a chatterbox to get close to Jojo. For example, Mo Lien was shameless and clingy. Her sweet words and honeyed words seeped into Jojo's life bit by bit. Before Jojo even realized it, she had already been tricked by Mo Lien. "Bah, shameless bastard. Look at Wu Ru. As soon as she started talking to Jojo, it was as if she had opened up a chatterbox. There was no stopping her. If things went on like this, how were they going to eat dinner? How baffling! Yuan Zhen suppressed the smile on her lips and quickly walked up. She curtsied at Miss Wu and said gently, "This servant will escort Miss Wu out." Wu Rumei quickly waved her small hands and stammered, "No need. There is no need to trouble Auntie to escort me out. Rumei will take her leave now." Strange, why did His Majesty's expression look so volatile? Could it be that she spoke too much with the Crown Princess and provoked His Majesty's displeasure? Wu Rumei quickly left. She turned back every 2 steps and waved at Arbor while calling out, "Crown Princess, Rumei will come find you tomorrow." The little Crown Princess expressionlessly waved her paw. Chapter 4992. Splash. After the sound of water splashing, a few corpse fish that were half hanging on the boat were kicked into the water. The water source near the River of Forgetfulness is severely polluted, Shen Wu said with a serious expression. Looks like we don't have to wait another 3 years for this place to be eliminated due to the harsh environment. After getting rid of the corpse fish at the entrance of the abyss of the sacrificial sea, Ji-Chen said solemnly, "Jojo's aura is faintly discernible. It looks like he came here before but left a day or 2 ago. Could he have returned to Dragon Flame City first?" Mo Lien pondered for a moment and nodded indifferently. "It's very possible. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go back immediately," the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal said hurriedly. Mo Lien had long been impatient to return home and wanted to rush back immediately. He didn't know how Qiao Qiao was doing right now. He must be scolding him every day. There's no time to lose. "Let's go back immediately," the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal urged. His gaze fell on the man and woman tied to the bow of the boat. How did they handle it? Since we've asked clearly, there's no need to keep them. Mo Lien responded apathetically, and after sweeping a glance at Shen Nangui and the others, he shifted his gaze back to where he came from. Shen Nangui was startled. He stammered and hurriedly made a sound. GC impolitely glared at him and lifted her hand to remove the ball of cloth from his mouth. Your Highness, we've already told you everything we know. We'll tell you everything we know. Please let the 2 of us live." When Crown Prince Emo heard this, he turned around and swept them a cold glance. Such a bone-chilling gaze caused Shenange and Lily to shut their mouths, no longer daring to speak carelessly. The Crown Prince in front of them had a cold and threatening gaze. It was as if his entire body was emitting a frosty aura. He was so magnificent and dazzling that no one dared to look at him directly. Your Highness, I also know that the Kingdom of Daluo is planning to secretly attack Dragon Flame City, Lily, Zero said, her body trembling uncontrollably. Lily, Shen Nangui turned pale with fright and tried to get up to cover Lily, Zero's mouth. However, GC's movements were too fast. She pushed his hand back and said, "Behave yourself. Don't get touchy as you please." Mo Lien gloomily stared at that woman in ragged clothes, who cut a sorry figure from head to toe, and who was covered in bloodstains. This woman had fallen into the sea several times before, and her head had even knocked against the deck of the boat several times. Although the wound on her head had already scabbed over, the dirty, unidentifiable bloody scar was extremely unpleasant to look at. Lily Zero had a tactful expression on her face as she cried out, "I overheard it. When the Grand Imperial Preceptor was discussing with the monarch, I just happened to hear a few words. They're secretly plotting to attack Dragon Flame City. I'm not lying. Bastard." Mo Lien's cold gaze swept past the emaciated Shen Nange. She suddenly raised her hand and sucked him under her feet. Shen Nange only felt an irresistible force pull him over. His body was involuntarily pulled over by the suction force. Why you guys?" Shen Nangui could not help but exclaim. When he felt his head being grabbed, his face turned pale. Mo Lien did not want to search his soul at first. There was something strange in this person's consciousness. Chapter 4993. However, she couldn't be bothered with that right now and directly pulled him up into the air. Halfway through the soul-searching, Mo Lien sensed that this guy's soul was about to explode, so she directly sent him flying with a kick, tossing him far into the sea. After the tremors subsided, huge waves crashed towards their small boat. Fortunately, Hu Shurchen was prepared and blocked all the splashes outside the defensive barrier. When Emo Lien returned with a grim expression, Hu Shurchen asked, "How was it?" "We only searched half of it. That restriction is very strong, so we were lucky to be able to search half of it." "Then what should we do now?" "Go find Duan Yu first." Hu Shurchen thought he misheard and stared at Emo Lien dumbfoundedly. "Find Duan Yu? Are you sure?" "Enchem." Emo Lien nodded expressionlessly. Hu Shurchen glanced at Emo Lien strangely and silently criticized in his mind. What kind of feelings does Emo Lien have for Duan Yu? The enemy was already about to reach his hometown in Dragonflame City, yet he still leisurely said to go find Duan Yu first. That's right. With Duan Yu's friendship with him, he would probably send reinforcements. This place is closer to Song Province, and we can't summon flying beasts or use transportation talisman matrices right now. Let's go ashore first. They had to find Duan Yu first. It would be faster if he used a flying spirit beast to send them back. Moreover, his Dragon Flame City's defenses weren't that easy to break through. With 30,000 elites gathered in the city, unless the kingdom of Duoluo sent 1,000,000 soldiers to attack, Dragonflame City should be able to handle it. How could a mere small grassland kingdom gather 1,000,000 soldiers? In any case, Emo Lien didn't believe it. Hu Shurchen nodded and coughed lightly. That's true. Finding Duan Yu for help seems more reliable. All right then, let's quickly depart for Phoenix Emperor City. How many days do you think it will take? Within 2 days, Emo Lien replied calmly. It was precisely because it was fast that they should hurry to Tsang Province to find Duan Yu. Otherwise, with the speed of the ship, it would take more than 10 days to swim back to the Divine Land slowly. He Chen patted Emo Lien's shoulder and said with a little, "Brother Duan Yu will definitely help us." Emo Lien nodded. When she turned around, her eyes coldly swept over GC. For some reason, GC felt a flash of inspiration, and she instantly understood the meaning behind her master's gaze. She hurriedly raised her hand, and a cold dagger appeared between her fingers. Before Lilier Zero could figure out what was going on, she felt an incomparably cold sensation in her throat. When he lowered his head to look, the dagger had already slit his throat, drawing out an incomparably magnificent line of blood. Lilier Zero's eyes widened as she made a sound from her throat. Her expression was one of disbelief as she struggled to speak. Why? Why did he kill her? She had already explained everything about the kingdom of Daluo, so why did he still want to kill her? Unwilling to accept this, Lilier Zero collapsed heavily on the ground with a sorrowful expression. Her neck was slightly arched, as though she wanted to see what color the haze in the sky could reveal. After all, she had just undergone plastic surgery, and her beautiful life had probably just begun. It was needless to say how miserable it was for her to die in this sea of forgetfulness. Lilier Zero's corpse was thrown into the sea to feed the zombie fish, so no one would care about her life or death. On the other side, Duan Yu, who was currently serving food to Sir Jojo, paused in his actions. His nose itched as though he was yearning for something. "Your Majesty, the East Mountain King requests an audience." Chapter 4994. Jojo, you eat first. I'll be right back. Arbor replied with an "oh," and was currently using his chopsticks to poke at a piece of tomato fish, battling with it. Yuan Zhen expressionlessly stood on the side, occasionally refilling the little crown princess soup and reminding her to drink more nourishing soup. Arbor secretly peeked at Yuan Zhen. "Aunt, you should also go eat." In reality, she really wasn't that particular about her meals. She simply didn't need someone to stand on the side and serve her with this and that. Yuan Zhen curtsied. "Yes." Thus, she led several junior palace maids out of the door. Seeing that there was no one else in the hall, the little crown princess immediately tossed her chopsticks aside and walked to the other end of the long table. She picked up a large soup spoon and ate 2 mouthfuls of corn shrimp. When Duan Yu entered, he saw the little stoic pacing back and forth around the table while holding a small silver bowl in her hand. She moved the spoon from side to side as if she was pointing at the mountains while muttering, "Eat this? I don't like it. Eat that? This corn shrimp tastes pretty good. Why are you so picky? Mother knows. You're too annoying. You can only make your own decisions after you come out. Listen to Mother for now." Duanyu couldn't resist twitching his mouth, and he quickly walked up to pull her back. "Who are you talking to?" This little fellow was rambling on, looking a bit comical. Arbor rubbed his stomach and said in all seriousness, "Baby likes to eat food with divine energy, but food with spiritual energy is a bit disdainful." As for ordinary ingredients, he seemed even more disdainful. Duanyu pursed his lips and said, "He's as picky as his father." Right. Arbor's eyes brightened, and he immediately said to Duanyu, "He's like his father. He's picky and especially annoying." Duanyu couldn't help nodding in amusement. "Yes, especially annoying. Jojo, this is for you." He casually stuffed a small piece of exquisite spice into her hands. "Light it to sleep at night. You'll sleep better and won't wake up in the middle of the night." Arbor was taken aback and muttered to himself, "You know." For the past 2 days, whenever she closed her eyes, she would feel as if she was floating and struggling on the sea. Her sleep was very restless. "Don't think too much about it. If our people have any news about them, they will naturally report back." Duanyu paused and looked at her with a grin. "You're overthinking things. Don't tell me you think they're already dead?" "Bah!" Arbor rolled his eyes. Duanyu couldn't help being amused. "There's nothing wrong with their life lantern miniatures, so you don't need to worry. Perhaps they don't have a boat or a paddle right now. They can only hold onto a broken wooden board and float on the sea. They float for a while, 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 float for a while." Sir Jojo glanced at him, and his tense little face suddenly relaxed. He laughed and said, "Liar. What happened just now?" "It's nothing, just some trivial matters." Duanyu pulled her to sit down. "Eat some more." "Achoo!" The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked up at the clear sky. "Didn't you say we could reach in a day or two?" GC and the others were rowing the boat with all their might. When they heard his voice, they turned back to look. "My lord, we're going against the wind, so we're rowing slower. We can reach the shore at the earliest tomorrow morning." "Hurry up, these conditions are simply too terrible. There's not even a shelter. Thankfully, it's not raining, or else we wouldn't even have a shelter. Don't, just shut up." Mo Lien glared at him. Whatever he said came out of his mouth. Chapter 4995. That night, as they wished, they welcomed a violent storm. Prince Mo was in awe of the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's mouth. Whatever he said came true without any hesitation. The few of them faced the wind and rain, working together in the same boat. In the pouring rain, they drifted along with the waves, bobbing up and down, swaying endlessly. GC and the other 3 took off their outer robes and sat on the boat. They held a jar in one hand and quickly filled it with water with the other. They hurriedly poured the water out of the boat. Mo Lien and Jichen each held an umbrella and sat expressionlessly at the side. They looked at each other wordlessly. Crown Prince Mo's heart was on the verge of collapse, and he was also very speechless. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was indeed a born jinx. He was used to tricking his teammates and himself. "Look at this torrential downpour. Our small boat probably won't be able to hold on for much longer." Before Jichen could finish speaking, Mo Lien abruptly stretched out a hand to cover her mouth. "You rascal, do you want this boat to be completely scrapped?" As soon as he finished speaking, a thunderous boom was heard from the horizon. A bolt of lightning as thick as a bull's mouth suddenly struck down, coincidentally landing on their boat. As a result, how could the entire ship withstand such a blow? In just a matter of minutes, the ship fell apart and scattered into the sea in pieces. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal squatted on a wooden plank and looked at Prince Mo with a dumbfounded expression. "Jichen." Mo Lien was so angry that she shouted his full name. "Will you die if you don't talk nonsense?" The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked at the sky, speechless. How could his words be so divine? How could he communicate with the heavens and summon the wind and rain with just one sentence? She wasn't his Qiao. Emolian glanced at him. From now on, don't talk. Ji Chen glared at Emolian angrily. The two of them were now standing on a broken wooden plank, drifting forward in the wind and rain. Although they had activated their defensive barriers to keep the water vapor outside, the current situation was simply too comical. Moreover, when had the two of them ever been so miserable? The boat had been torn apart, and they had to use a plank as a stepping stone. Emolian glared at Ma Shurchen again. Don't talk. I didn't say anything, Yuan Shurchen said innocently. Emolian, what should we do now? GC and the others beside him were also lying on half of the wooden planks with dumbfounded expressions on their faces. They were still holding the jugs that they used to scoop water from before, and it seemed that they still hadn't recovered from the shock of the lightning flash just now. Emolian said expressionlessly. Fortunately, this place is not far from the shore. I plan to use the flying talisman to fly ashore. What do you say? Of course I'm with you. Heechin quickly said, so, you're going to abandon the ship and leave? What a joke. The ship had already been struck by lightning and thunder. If it didn't fly, would it really drift on the sea? Emolian really wanted to rush over and give him a good kick. Didn't he know why he would abandon the ship? Whatever that Jinx said came true. At this moment, Emolian felt angry just looking at him. I didn't do it on purpose. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal said sullenly, I was just saying. Who would have thought that the weather on the sea would change so suddenly? It suddenly started raining. Emolian was expressionless. She took out a few flying talismans from her sleeve and threw them to the others. Keep up. He couldn't be bothered to talk to Yuan Shurchen anymore. If he ignored him and left him hanging, he would definitely complain to his wife when he saw his wife later. Notice, it's almost 11 o'clock when I'm back from working overtime today. I'll catch up on sleep first and catch up on the third watch tomorrow morning. I reckon that this month at the end of the year will be very busy. Chapter 4996. Chichen hastily said to GC and the others with a grin, all right, don't lie motionlessly on the wooden plank. Everyone has a flight talisman. Keep up. GC and GC were overjoyed and hastily caught the flight talismans Emolian tossed over. They swiftly slapped them on their bodies and soared into the sky. They originally thought that they would have to expend their divine energy to fly, but now that they used flight talismans, they realized that it was a great fortune amidst misfortune. As they floated in the sky above the river of forgetfulness amidst the wind and rain, everyone's hearts ached a bit. Wasn't this too bitter? On the other side, Arbor slept until the middle of the night when she was suddenly jolted awake by a nightmare. She hastily sat up and curled up her legs while hugging her quilt. Her delicate brows involuntarily knitted together. Inexplicably, she actually dreamed that her husband was asking for help at sea just now. She must have dreamed of what she thought about during the day. How could her husband be hugging her thigh and sobbing pitifully? Misconception. Definitely. The little stoic cracked her small lips. This fellow laid down again and tossed and turned on the bed for a while. She heard the rustling of the rain outside the window accompanied by the whistling of the wind, so noisy that she couldn't calm down. The little stoic abruptly sat up. She couldn't sleep again. They couldn't have really met with great misfortune at sea as Duan Yu predicted, right? The little stoic muttered to herself before jumping off the bed and putting on her brocade shoes before heading outside. The rain outside was rather heavy, and the faint sound of a flute was faintly transmitted into the wind, sounding like weeping and complaining, drawn out and continuous. Arbor soundlessly left the room and took out an ink-painted umbrella from her inner world, following the sound of the flute forward. Pausing in the pitter-patter of rain, Arbor gazed at the figure in plain clothes inside the pavilion. She felt that his back was bleak, as if it contained endless sorrow. Arbor hesitated slightly, but she still couldn't resist walking into the pavilion with heavy footsteps. That person suddenly turned around, a pair of watery peach blossom eyes staring fixedly at her. His clothes were very thin, and as he stood in the wind, his surroundings were silent and still, as if he was the only person left in the world. His figure was slender and tall with long black hair, and he tightly gripped a green bamboo flute in his hand. When he looked at Arbor, his pitch-black pupils involuntarily made her heart tighten. "Did I wake you up?" He smiled apologetically at her. After 3 seconds of silence, the two people said, "I couldn't sleep." Hence, they looked at each other with a smile. Mother's 100th day. The day she left, it was just like today. It was raining cats and dogs, and it didn't stop. A whole hole pierced through the sky. "It's your own heart that's been stabbed, right?" Xiao Mu thought to herself. Duan Yu gently raised his hand and swept his sleeve across the round table in the pavilion. His fingers slowly caressed the icy surface of the table. She was only a normal person. There will come a day when she will leave before me. Life is like this. From the day you are born, you will experience loss, 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 until there is nothing left for you to lose. However, your obsession is too heavy. You will always wonder if I could have redeemed everything if I had arrived a bit earlier that day. However, we don't have ifs. The little stoic stood behind him and listened silently. Her small hands involuntarily clenched. Who didn't have an obsession? Everyone had one. It depended on how you faced it. As long as there is a glimmer of hope, no one is willing to be alone. Chapter 4997. Duan Yu, she didn't know how to comfort him. She only felt that all words of comfort were empty and weak. How could she empathize without experiencing it personally? Just like when the holy water sect left her back then, she was in so much pain that she couldn't breathe and couldn't easily say, "I can let it go." In reality, it was simply hard to let it go. They were only ordinary people in the world, not those aloof and resolute people who could see the world clearly. There were 8 great sufferings in life. Love, separation, and hatred were difficult to obtain. No one could help her. She could only walk out on her own and release her emotions. Duan Yu. The little stoic called out to him. Like a kitten's paw, she lightly scratched the lake in his heart and parted the layers of ripples. Duan Yu suddenly turned around and strode forward. He abruptly pulled her into his arms and tightly hugged her. This hug had nothing to do with romance, only a sense of disappointment and loss. The little stoic was startled and subconsciously wanted to pry his arms away and break free from his embrace. However, she heard him lower his head next to her ear and murmur vaguely, "Don't move, just a hug is enough." He would only hug her once in this lifetime, and it would also be his impudence tonight. In reality, he already knew that if he missed it for a moment, he would miss it for a lifetime. Even if time turned back, even if water was spilled, a missed opportunity was a missed opportunity. He couldn't force it in this lifetime. When the little stoic returned to the room, it was already late at night. The light inside the room was dim, and a figure was indistinct outside the door. The shadows of the trees outside the window swayed, and the rustling of the rain accompanied by the sound of the wind made one's heart endlessly vexed. Xiao Mu sat on the edge of the bed for a long time before abruptly slapping her own leg. "Who asked you to go out of curiosity? Who asked you to be unable to control your legs?" She abruptly threw herself onto the bed, allowing herself to sink into the soft brocade quilt. What to do? After going out for a walk, she became even more unable to sleep. The little stoic tossed and turned on the bed, inwardly vexed. She felt that she wouldn't be able to face him tomorrow at all after that hug. Even the stoic face understood how deep and heavy this man's feelings for her were. The little fellow rolled around in the soft brocade quilt for most of the night. Finally, she couldn't hold it in any longer. She flipped open the blanket and jumped off the bed. After taking out pen and paper from her inner world, the little stoic sat down at the table. She hesitated for a very, very long time before writing a few words and rolling them out. She wrote a few more words and rolling them out again. Just like that, an hour passed. Looking at the sky, it was almost bright. In the end, he couldn't dawdle any longer. The little crown princess took a deep breath and wrote a line of words on the paper. Then she covered the paper and walked out quickly. Outside the window, the morning breeze blew in. Under the paperweight was a thin piece of paper with 4 words written on it. "Go home, don't miss me." When he went out, the rain had already stopped. The puddles on the ground had yet to dry up. He raised his head to look at the sky. It was all gray and there was no sunlight at all. The little stoic didn't close her eyes for the entire night, so she was a bit listless and dispirited. They followed the hollow flower hairpin corridor all the way to the east, intending to release the flying beast after they left the palace gate. However, she unexpectedly paused after turning a corner. She looked at the figure standing under the tree in the atrium, and an inexplicable sense of guilt arose in her heart. That's right, she was a coward who fled in defeat. She never expected that this person had already seen through everything about her and had been waiting for her here. The little stoic's footsteps faltered, and she paced behind the pillar like a mushroom, unable to think of what to say. Chapter 4998. Yet she heard that person call out loudly, "Jojo, good morning." With a radiant smile, he quickly walked toward her. The little stoic hid behind the pillar, pondering what she should say without hurting his heart. In reality, if she didn't truly care, with the little stoic's personality, she wouldn't have taken this matter to heart at all. She didn't want to treat him cruelly and inexplicably give him hope but also disappoint him. She also didn't want to be irresolute and make a mess of things. This person was one of the most important people in her life. He was her close friend, her confidant, and someone she would inevitably worry about for the rest of her life. But there was only one heart that loved hubby, and it couldn't be increased or decreased by a single bit. Hubby treats me wholeheartedly, and I also cherish him dearly. He is my lifelong dependence, and I will never leave or abandon him, and I will never forget him. It is only my heart. Why not tell Duan Yu everything clearly from the beginning? If it was impossible, then it was impossible. But the little stoic felt that 2 strands of hair on her head were about to turn white from thinking about how to speak. Her heart was tormented and conflicted. On the other hand, Duan Yu had already strode forward and pulled her out from behind the pillar with one hand. I don't want to make you suffer, and I don't want to make things difficult for you or disappoint you. I don't want to give you any hope because I especially cherish you. You are also a very, very important friend of mine. I just wanted to tell you. There is only one Lien in this world. Wherever Jojo's Lien goes, Jojo will go. If he ascends to heaven, I will also ascend to heaven. If he enters the Yellow Springs, I will also follow him. The little stoic only felt that her words were incoherent and unclear. She looked at him anxiously and asked, do you understand what I mean? Duan Yu suddenly chuckled and flicked her forehead. What are you thinking about? You're always so thoughtful and love to think about all sorts of things at such a young age. Your thoughts are boundless. It can't be because I hugged you last night, so you feel that my heart is attached to you? You fierce girl, other than that stupid Emo Lien, who would dare to like you? Do you still remember how you beat me up when we first met? I'm not a fool. Why would I like to be abused by you? You won't give up until you hit a wall? That's not me. The little stoic pursed her lips and stole a glance at him. What's wrong with this person? How many years had it been? Why was she still harping on the matter of beating him up when they first met? Stingy. I'm just helping that idiot take care of you for a while. When he comes back, I'll immediately hand you over to him without any hesitation. Do you think you're easy to raise? Let me tell you. You're so annoying. All right, you don't have to say anything more. Hurry up and follow me to have breakfast. After you're done eating, go back to your room and get some sleep. Don't let your imagination run wild. The little stoic opened her small mouth, but her words were stuffed back down her throat by his string of words. Her footsteps involuntarily followed him. Breakfast was like a battle. This guy kept stuffing food into her mouth. The little stoic rubbed her round belly and followed him back to her bedchamber. If you leave without saying goodbye, I won't forgive you for the rest of my life, he suddenly said in a low voice. Arbor stole a glance at him before stiffening his neck and turning around. I just went for a stroll. What do you mean by leaving without saying goodbye? Duan Yu chuckled. Little heartless. All right, you can go in. I still have things to do. Chapter 4999. Arbor replied with an "oh" and slowly walked forward. His gaze remained on her from beginning to end, and the playful smile on his face dissipated bit by bit as she left. It was as if the starlight had dissipated, leaving behind a long river of serenity that seemed endless and unending. In the end, he only watched her walk in with a serene gaze before closing the palace doors behind her. The heavy sound of the doors closing weighed heavily on his heart. He stared at those two tightly shut palace doors for a long time before turning around to leave. Today, he was no longer in the mood for court matters and didn't want to think about anything. He had accurately predicted that she would flee far away in defeat, but he still didn't predict that his heart would still be so unbearable in the end. He entered the study, closed the doors, and opened the windows. With a wooden expression, he picked up the brush and wrote a vigorous and forceful Jing character on the unfolded paper. If his heart wasn't calm, how could he calm his heart? Jojo said that she didn't want to give him the slightest bit of hope, afraid that he would feel unbearable. But how could she have known that perhaps, as long as there was the slightest bit of hope, it would make him happy instead? Even if he would still be disappointed or even despairing in the future, at least he once had that slightest bit of hope. He threw down the brush and dampened the Jing character on the paper. Like the ripples in his heart, they spread outwards. I'm sorry, Jojo. I lied to you. I only didn't want you to leave. I purely didn't want you to leave me at this time. I was worried. I was afraid that once I left, we would meet again as strangers in the future. I lied to you that I didn't have the slightest bit of feelings for you. Those were lies. I can't speak of the 10,000 points of affection I have for you in my heart. I only wish to bury them deeply and not give you the slightest chance to see through them. I like you, my heart is pleased with you, and I can't help but want to get close to you. Even if it's just watching you silently, my heart is enough, and this life is enough. Arbor slept until nighttime before waking up, and he was actually a bit groggy when he got up. The little stoic pulled a taut face and brushed open the window in passing. She then heard indistinct, fragmented words. Did you hear? The 9th princess got into a fight with 2 women in the rear garden. Aya, lower your voice. Ever since the 9th princess married the prince of the barbarian tribe, she has been coming back to complain to His Majesty every few days. This is not a matter of a day or two. A little palace maid with a sharp voice snickered and said, why would His Majesty care about her? They all say that a married daughter is like spilled water. Not to mention that His Majesty is not even her biological brother. Even if he was, who would care about the life and death of an unfavored princess? Do you know who those 2 women are? Who knows? Prince Dua has so many concubines. These 2 must have been taken in recently. Can the 9th princess beat him? Is the crown princess awake? Yuan Zhen's voice came from outside the door. Come in. The young crown prince consort's voice was completely emotionless. Yuan Zhen entered the door and bowed. Before she could open her mouth, she heard the little crown princess say, Auntie, there are 3 gossips outside. Have someone drag them in. Yuan Zhen was taken aback, and she quickly turned around to give her 2 personal royal maids a look. Those 2 nimble royal maids hastily strode out the door and dragged in the 3 wailing junior palace maids in a short while, kicking them to the ground. The 3 junior palace maids were all quite young, and their eyes were flustered. They shrunk their heads back and didn't dare to meet the little crown princess's eyes. How could Yuan Zhen not understand? Her face darkened, and she shouted angrily, How dare you? Crown princess, spare my life. Crown princess, spare my life. Chapter 5000. The 3 little palace maids panicked in fright, repeatedly kowtowing and apologizing to Arbor, loudly begging for mercy. Arbor sat there expressionlessly, coldly looking at the 3 people kneeling on the ground. Yuan Zhen gave a meaningful look to the palace maid beside her. That palace maid quickly stepped forward, picking up a crying little palace maid on the ground, and coldly asking, Speak, who ordered you to come here and spread rumors? What is your purpose? And, spare us. Crown princess, spare us. Crown princess, spare us, we don't know. The little crown princess coldly glanced at them. With a wave of her hand, 3 dictum talismans flew into the 3 people's bodies. Speak, who ordered you to come here? It's eunuch Yang. He gave us some mystic coins and food, told us to come here and pass on a few words. Yuan Zhen's face instantly became very ugly. She naturally knew about this eunuch Yang. He used to be a respectable person by Empress Lu's side, and now he was one of the most capable great eunuchs by the Empress Dowager's side. But he was properly on duty at Renchuan Palace, so why did he come to provoke the little crown princess for no reason? Didn't he know that the little crown princess was not someone to be provoked? He simply didn't know how stupid he was to do this. Send someone to inform His Majesty. Where is that eunuch Yang? The little crown princess coldly asked. Yuan Zhen only felt that things were not good, and her heart couldn't help but slightly sink. She quickly replied, Eunuch Yang is the Empress Dowager's Renchuan Palace's eunuch. Arbor stood up with an indifferent expression, walking outside. Go to Renchuan Palace. Crown Princess, do you want to go there personally? Although His Majesty had never had any interaction with this Empress Dowager Lu after ascending the throne, and never liked her. But if the Crown Princess just went there like this, then Yuan Zhen repeatedly signaled to the palace maid behind her with her eyes. That person understood, quickly and quietly retreated, quickly running towards the front hall. Today's matter was probably not over. Bring them along. The young Crown Princess ordered coldly, her face expressionless. From the first day she entered the Azure Palace, the days had never stopped. Previously, there was a palace maid who tried to poison her again and again. She couldn't take it anymore and killed her. Now, someone else had come to provoke them. Could it be that Jojo gave others the impression that he was a soft persimmon that anyone could step on? When a persimmon gets angry, it can also choke people to death. Arbor walked out of the palace doors with a stoic expression and headed for Queen Dowager Lu's Renchuan Palace under the guidance of a group of people. The three little palace maids cried until their eyes were crooked and their mouths were slanted. Snot and tears flowed down their faces. They were tied up with ropes and dragged away. All the way, they couldn't help but let out faint sobbing sounds. What are you crying for? Arbor shouted impatiently. These people were really sick. They didn't have the ability, but they liked to go around provoking people. When they were caught red-handed, they always liked to act pitiful, making it seem like she was so cruel. If it weren't for people always coming to provoke her, she wouldn't have bothered with them for 100 years. Stuff their mouths first. Yuan Zhen kept thinking about the little grandaunt in her heart, hoping that His Majesty would quickly appear. Looking at this situation, it probably wasn't just that eunuch Yang who was unlucky. Empress Dowager Lu would also be implicated. The three little palace maids trembled incessantly. After their mouths were stuffed, they could only let out fragmented whimpers. Xiao Mu's mood only improved slightly after the ringing in her ears became much quieter. Chapter 5001. However, when the group of people turned to the back garden, they heard heart-wrenching cries before they had even taken a few steps. Several tumbling figures punched and kicked, tearing and pulling from one end of the path to the other. Unable to control their bodies, they fell and rolled into the flowers. Everyone could only stop in their tracks and look at each other. They saw three women with disheveled clothes and hairpins, as if they had gone mad, fighting in a chaotic mess. However, it was mainly 2 against 1. Grabbing the ends of one of the women's hair, they pulled and tore, tearing off half of her sleeve. On his bare arms, there were a few obvious scratches made by fingernails. This time, Aunt Yuan Zhen's expression became even more unsightly, because she had already recognized who was being dragged and beaten by the 2 foreign women. It was the 9th princess, Rong Yu, who had married into the barbarian tribe not long ago. This was simply too outrageous. Why aren't you pulling them away? You're all dead. Yuan Zhen angrily berated. The small palace servants who were secretly watching this farce from the side hurriedly went forward to pull the 3 women. After separating them with great difficulty, Rong Yu screamed and wanted to go forward to fight back, but Yuan Zhen blocked her with one hand. Prince Consort, you'd better think thrice before you act. Yuan Zhen said with a sullen face, it's fine if those uncivilized shrews don't know etiquette. However, Prince Consort has received the best education in Artsangzhou. Don't lose the demeanor a mistress of the household should have. Rong-yu, who stood there with disheveled hair. Her entire body was in pain, and her head was about to explode. Songzhou's imperial family is only SOSO. One of the foreign women who had been scolded by Yuanjun said with a face full of mockery, "The daughter they taught is even worse than us uncivilized shrews." "Impudent," Yuanjun angrily rebuked. These two concubines of Prince Yuhua were too ignorant of etiquette and impudent. Where did they think they were? This was the inner court of the Azure Palace. They actually dared to be so impudent and bite the 9th princess in the back garden. It was simply Yuanjun was so angry that her face turned green. The two exotic women both had the bloodline of the grassland. Their eye sockets were deep, and their noses were high. They were indeed beautiful, but their coquettish and rude appearance greatly reduced their beauty. "We're not from Tsong Prefecture. You're just a servant in the palace. How dare you scold a guest like this? What a joke! Hurry up and get out of the way, we sisters still have to rush back to serve the prince. Isn't that so? The prince is still waiting for us in the bedroom. If we disturb the prince's mood, I don't think any of you can afford to take responsibility." The two girls really dared to say anything unrestrained. Yuanjun's face turned ashen when he heard that. Arbor stood expressionlessly on the side. At first, he didn't want to interrupt, but when he heard the two women provoking the crowd, he couldn't help but frown. "You're too noisy," the little crown princess said coldly. "Even a pheasant sounds better than the two of you." The two women had been giggling, but when they heard the little crown princess's words, they couldn't help but be startled. Their laughter abruptly stopped. One of them shouted in exasperation, "Damned girl, do you want to die?" Yuanzhen was so angry that his heart was in turmoil. He angrily shouted, "Impudent! A concubine of a prince from a tiny barbarian tribe dares to be so rude in the inner court of the Azure Palace. Take them down." Immediately, 3 to 5 tall and sturdy female servants rushed over. Just as they were about to reach out and grab the two women. Chapter 5002. Who would have thought that the two women would suddenly attack, two daggers coming out of their sleeves, aiming for the young crown princess' neck. Yuanzhen's heart tightens, and even the voice that comes out of his mouth trembles. "Quick, someone come quickly, take down these two female assassins." If they hurt this little ancestor, in his majesty's rage, he would most likely implicate everyone present. After following by this person's side for a few days, how could Yuanzhen not understand? This His Majesty, protected the young crown princess like she was his treasure. He absolutely wouldn't allow anyone to touch a single strand of her hair. Whoever dares to touch her can only wait for bad luck. But Arbor doesn't even spare the two women a glance. She directly reaches out a slender jade hand and grabs the dagger that's coming for her neck with her bare hands. "Crown Princess!" Yuanzhen is so frightened that he almost kneels down in front of the crown princess. How could such a small hand that's like white tofu so casually grab the other party's dagger? Only to hear a dang sound. The young crown princess' jade hand is like a diamond drill, directly cutting off half of the dagger. The concubine's face is filled with disbelief. Yuanzhen and the others' ashen complexions also slightly relax. Before they can even take a deep breath, they see the young crown princess fly straight up, like a nimble leopard, and send a flying kick out. She stupidly kicks one of the concubines in the face. Bang! That person is sent flying, her back heavily smashing into an evergreen tree. Her entire person rolls down from the tree in a very sorry state, groaning twice. How could she still get up? The other concubine is completely stunned, the dagger in her hand momentarily not being able to hold it steady, and it falls to the ground with a clang sound. Arbor knits her brows. The person behind the scenes went through so much trouble, reaching into the palace and making all sorts of arrangements, only to arrange such a joke? First, he bribed eunuch Yang by Empress Dowager Lu's side, and then let him use some resources to lure 3 palace maids to do his bidding. In the end, he just wanted to lure her into the back garden and let 2 concubines with low cultivation to kill her? It was completely unreasonable for them to go through so much trouble and only send out 2 low-level assassins. There was something fishy about this matter. Arbor took a step forward, and the pale-faced concubine couldn't help but cry out, "Prince, Your Highness. Help, help. The concubine only managed to utter a few words before she was pressed down by a group of guards. Her face touched the ground and her entire body was pressed to the ground. She struggled bitterly but was unable to move. Tu Lang, what are you waiting for? Are you waiting for them to kill me? If we sisters die, the prince will definitely not let you go. Suddenly, the treetops moved, and a huge gust of wind blew down from the sky. Crown Princess. Yuan Zhen and the others only felt the ground tremble. When they looked up, they saw a strange thing with a wolf head and a human body that was 2.5 meters long appear in the imperial garden. His fist was as big as a giant alms bowl. When he punched towards the little crown princess's head, Yuan Zhen and the others' hearts couldn't help but clench. In front of this tall giant, the petite crown princess was simply like a little child. She could be crushed with a single finger. So the main character was waiting for her here. Arbor's lips curled into a cold smile. She leaned to the side and quickly dodged the big fist that was like a copper alms bowl. Everyone only heard a loud bang. Chapter 5003. At the same time, at the north gate of the Phoenix Emperor City, a carriage with a blue canopy passed by the long line of people moving forward as fast as lightning. The wheels of the carriage rolled over the bluestone road, making a series of sounds. The pedestrians in front of the line couldn't help but turn their heads to look at the person who cut the line. Marquis in Xingho is ordered to leave the capital. He has something to do. A fast horse came forward, holding a round token in his hand, and waved it at the guards. The two guards immediately saluted respectfully, glanced at the token, and hurriedly asked the pedestrians to move to the side. Marquis, thank you. Please. Marquis in Xingho's carriage was about to pass through the arched bridge of the city gate. Just then, he heard a series of rumbling horse hooves coming from behind, followed by a cold shout, "Everyone listen to my order. Take down in Xingho." Hundreds of soldiers with spears and swords swarmed forward. In just a few seconds, in Xingho's carriage was completely surrounded. The curtain of the carriage was gently lifted, and in Xingho's thin old face appeared at the window. He smiled at a middle-aged bearded general who was chasing after him on a horse. "East Mountain King, why have you led your men here? I've been summoned to do something." Please. "His Majesty wants to see you." And Xingho's thin face showed a faint smile. He laughed dryly and said, "I don't know why His Majesty summons me." East Mountain King Wu Heng said expressionlessly, "Marquis, you must be joking. Since His Majesty summons you, it's your duty as a minister. How can you inquire so many people before meeting His Majesty?" And Xingho's smiling face turned gloomy little by little. The corners of his mouth moved and he said coldly, "I'm not feeling well these days. I'm afraid His Majesty is sick. Why don't East Mountain King report to His Majesty? Marquis, do you want to defy the edict?" East Mountain King Wu Heng glanced at Xingho with a faint smile, fiddling with a sharpened dagger in his hand. East Mountain King said with a smile, "I'm afraid Marquis has no room to refuse." And Xingho's face turned green and white, and his palms on his knees were tightly clenched into fists. "Guards, escort and Xingho back to the palace to see His Majesty." Hundreds of soldiers surrounded the carriage. Two of them even straddled the coachman's seat and kicked the trembling coachman off the carriage. And Xingho was silent for 2 seconds. Then he sneered and said, "East Mountain King, you don't have to do this. If Marquis is willing to cooperate with this prince, then this prince naturally does not want to force my own colleagues." Humph. And Xingho gritted his teeth, slammed down the curtain and sat in the carriage. However, in just a moment, the curtain of the carriage was lifted again. Wu Heng, the East Mountain King, jumped up with a smile and sat in the same carriage as in Xingho. Xingho was furious. "What is the meaning of this, Wang Ye? This prince is a little tired today. Let me borrow the Marquis' carriage." Your Highness doesn't need to be like this. Since this Marquis has already agreed to go with you to see His Majesty, I naturally can't do anything else. You don't have to monitor me so closely." The Eastern Mountain King, Wu Heng, shook his head and smiled. "That's hard to say. There's no guarantee that the Marquis doesn't have some talismans or treasures that can teleport. Since this prince is following orders, I naturally have to take precautions. East Mountain King is really loyal. East Mountain King, Wu Heng didn't mind the sarcasm in his words. He smiled and said, "It's my duty to share His Majesty's worries. There's no such thing as loyalty." And Xingho closed his eyes and said nothing. Chapter 5004. This East Mountain King Wu Heng was indeed a character. Originally, this king with a different surname had a withered number of talents in the king's mansion and was gradually declining. He didn't expect that because of his unique vision and meritorious service in supporting the new emperor, the entire East Mountain King's mansion was now being used again. And Xingho sighed in his heart. He was indeed too anxious and hadn't made sufficient preparations. His rash action had indeed exposed him. However, the desire to avenge his daughter was like an ant gnawing on a fire, tormenting him day and night. He had no choice but to do this. East Mountain King Wu Heng saw that he closed his eyes and didn't speak. Seeing that they had been officials for many years, he couldn't help but shake his head and sigh, "Why do you have to do this?" And Xingho opened his eyes and couldn't help but sneer, "It's easy for you to say. If your daughter was humiliated and killed like this, I'll see if you can face it easily." Bam! Tu Lang's fist smashed heavily on the ground. The cobblestone ground of the small path had completely cracked under his heavy punch. Everyone couldn't help but feel terrified. This person's external martial arts were like a meat shield and were quite sturdy and durable. Several guards rushed up and pierced their swords with spiritual power, but they couldn't cut through his external defense. On the other hand, this man with great strength swung his arm and flung the guards away, causing them to fall into the surrounding grass and flowers. Arbor leaned to the side to avoid his heavy punch and turned to glare at this person. "Heh, being fat means you can fight? What a big joke." She raised her hand and slapped several defense talismans and gravity talismans on her body, wrapping herself properly. Then she stood to the side. She hooked her finger at the strange wolf-headed man. "Today, if you can shake me even a little bit, I'll surrender." When Yuan Zhen and the others heard this, their faces turned even paler. They couldn't help but cry out in grief in their hearts, "Crown Princess, can you not court death? This wolf-headed monster looks extremely strong. If he gets close to you, even if your divine skills are unparalleled, I'm afraid you'll be at a disadvantage. Moreover, this little crown princess is too boastful. What did it mean to be slightly shaken? In other words, as long as this strange man pushed the little crown princess even half a step away, the crown princess would be at his mercy? Come. The little stoic raised her hand and beckoned at that howling werewolf. The two concubines looked at each other, supported each other, and stood up in a sorry state. They were just looking for an opportunity to sneak away, but unexpectedly, Yuan Zhen signaled with her eyes and sent a few old nannies forward to block their way. "Two guests, before this matter is completely resolved, please stay here." The two women's faces alternated between green and red. One of them couldn't help but scold in a low voice, "Since you know we are guests, why are you blocking our way?" Yuan Zhen sneered, "Let's wait for your prince to come over and report this matter to him face to face." As he spoke, the werewolf waved his hands, and a dozen punches flew towards the young crown princess's face. Gusts of wind blew, and the shadows of his fists overlapped. Those dozen punches were about to land on the young crown princess. Suddenly, Duan Yu heard a group of people hurrying over from outside the garden. He saw this heart-wrenching scene from afar. With an angry shout of, "You dare!" he had already rushed forward. The Devil Emperor's sword abruptly appeared in his palm, and he slashed at the werewolf's neck without another word. "Your Majesty, please don't attack. This is my barbarian tribe's brave warrior, Tu Lang, this prince's personal guard." Duan Yu couldn't be bothered to listen to his nonsense. Chapter 5005. The Devil Emperor's sword in his hand had already swiftly brushed past that werewolf's neck. With a swish, a silvery white flame emerged on his neck, burning a bloody hole. Everyone couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Tu Lang's skin was as tough as copper and iron, and it was impossible to easily penetrate his impenetrable defense. At the same time, Tu Lang's dozen punches had already landed on the little stoic's defensive talismans. Everyone's eyelids twitched incessantly as they heard several thump 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 sounds. They watched as Tu Lang's attacks broke through the defensive barrier layer by layer. Seeing that the little crown princess's last defensive barrier was about to be penetrated, the crown princess seemed to be in imminent danger. Unexpectedly, the expressionless little crown princess took out another handful of talismans from her pocket and pasted them all on her body with several smack 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 sounds. Layer after layer of defensive barriers appeared around her once again. Meanwhile, the gales that Tu Lang sent out were already exhausted and had no more strength to break through the little crown princess's defenses. Everyone couldn't resist twitching their mouths as they silently glanced at the silent crown princess. As expected, such a powerful wave of attacks from Tu Lang couldn't shake the little crown princess in the slightest. It couldn't even make her move a single toe. It was as if the little crown princess had grown out of the ground and was rooted there motionlessly. Her posture was as straight as a pine tree, and only the hem of her clothes and strands of hair fluttered in the wind. "You've lost." After a long time, the stupefied crowd finally heard the crown princess say this. What to do? They inexplicably felt this was a bit comical. "It's my turn to hit you now." The little crown princess expressionlessly rolled up her sleeves. "Everyone, did we mishear or did we not notice it earlier? When did the crown prince consort say that she would fight with Tu Lang once each? I'll beat you to death." As the little crown princess said this, she continued to paste several dozen acceleration talismans on her body with smack smack smack. Multi-attack talismans. Multi-attack talismans. Multi-defense talismans. Multi-defense talismans. Multiple speed talismans. The little crown princess had put over 100 talismans on her body, and everyone's expression was almost numb. She suddenly moved. She leaped into the air and punched towards the werewolf's head without hesitation. The gravity talisman made her feel very heavy. With a ferocious strike, the wind from the fist carried a whistling force as it heavily smashed into the werewolf's head. The man spat out a mouthful of blood and stumbled forward a dozen steps. His body swayed a few times. In the end, he couldn't support himself and collapsed to the ground with a boom. In the huge imperial garden, it was completely silent. Duan Yu's lips involuntarily twitched, and it was quite a while before he coughed lightly. "Ahem, Jojo." He walked forward and wanted to pull her to his side, but when he pulled, he realized that the little crown princess was rooted to the ground and did not move at all. He actually couldn't budge her. Duan Yu couldn't resist face-palming. How many talismans did this fool paste on her body? Wasn't this cheating and bullying? Prince Yuhua, who walked over with Duan Yu, felt his jaw nearly drop. He looked dumbfoundedly at the little crown princess and suddenly pointed at her and exclaimed, It's you." He had an impression of this person. "The crown princess of the divine province, why are you here?" He truly had an impression of this stoic-faced woman. Chapter 5006. Treacherous and vicious. Utterly unreasonable. When they first met at the academy, she kicked him squarely in the chest. No one else could do that, right? His brother, Prince Zulu, also died at the hands of this unkind little butcher. In reality, their barbarian tribe had yet to settle the score with her, but this woman was unsatisfied. She dared to do anything brazenly, kicking him the moment they met, and now severely injuring his bodyguard. Quick, take a look." Prince Daiwa quickly waved his hand, ordering people to check guard Tu Lang's injuries. Tu Lang was directly sprawled on the ground from the young crown princess's punch. Two of Prince Daiwa's royal guards hastily rushed up, but they were unable to turn Tu Lang's massive body around even after exerting all their strength. The two awkwardly reached out to check his pulse before quickly turning around to report, "Reporting to Your Highness the Prince, guard Tu Lang is already not breathing." "What?" Prince Daiwa's head was throbbing in anger, and he glared fixedly at Arbor as he shouted furiously, What are you shouting for?" Duan Yu irritably interrupted Prince Daiwa's roar and swept a displeased glance at the prince. "You dare to scare Jojo? You must be tired of living." Duan Yu's handsome face darkened as he impatiently retorted, Daiwa, you better give us a clear explanation. Why did you assign your bodyguard to attack the crown princess? And what's up with those 2 royal concubines of yours? Prince Daiwa looked at him in bewilderment, his nose huffing and puffing. Your Majesty of Zhangzhou, this prince still wants you to give me an explanation. Why is this crown princess of the divine province in your palace? What improper relationship do you two have? Why did she attack this prince's bodyguard for no reason? Don't think you're in the right just because you're loud. This prince is telling you if you don't give me an explanation, we won't let this matter rest. This prince still wants to spread this news and smear you too. The Emperor of Zhangzhou, the crown princess of the divine land. Prince Kuo, don't bully the crown princess for not being good with words. Don't think that you can slander others just because the crown princess doesn't say anything. Yuan Zhen said angrily, it was your 2 concubines who started this. When we were passing by with the crown prince consort, for some reason, those 2 concubines of yours suddenly attacked the crown prince consort. Nonsense. A trace of anger flashed across Prince Dawa's tanned face. He turned back to look at the 2 disheveled concubines and said angrily, you beat my 2 beloved concubines to such a state, and now you dare to accuse others? My 2 beloved concubines are just low-level cultivators. Would they be so stupid as to provoke the crown princess of the divine land? It's not like he has nothing better to do. Yuan Zhenzhen was so angry that she laughed. They're just that brainless. What evidence do you have? Prince Dawa roared angrily, looking like his intelligence had been insulted by Yuan Zhen. Little crown princess took out a jade image talisman from her pocket and threw it into the air. Everyone's mouth twitched silently. Don't you think this fellow is sinister? She actually recorded the entire battle scene just now. She didn't argue with you, much less argue with you. She just threw out the evidence directly. The image projection was clear at a glance. From the moment the crown princess stood here, she hadn't said much. After she finished speaking, she was immediately rebuked by the 2 concubines. The 2 women were even very bold. They took out daggers from their sleeves and slashed at the crown princess' neck. It was clear that there was no room for argument. Prince Dawa looked like he had eaten shit. Chapter 5007. After stammering for half a beat, Prince Dawa finally found his voice and turned to glance at Duan Yu. Your Majesty, this must be a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. This short and stout dark-skinned prince strode to the 2 trembling concubines and rewarded them with a slap each with a wave of his hand. You 2 must have eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's gall, right? You even dare to provoke the crown princess of the divine province? You don't know that the crown princess of the divine province's peerless martial prowess is unrivaled in this world. Even this prince can only concede defeat in front of the crown princess. Why aren't you scramming over and apologizing to the crown princess? Do you still need this prince to teach you? Duan Yu knitted his brows when he heard his sour words. His sarcastic tone seemed to be praising Qiao Qiao, but in fact, it was full of sarcasm. Those 2 concubines promptly prostrated themselves on the ground and cried out timidly, we were blind and didn't know it was the crown princess who had graced us with her presence. The young crown princess flicked her finger, and 2 ebony talismans flew to the concubines and hit their foreheads with 2 smacks. Prince Dawa's eyes flared with anger, and he was about to shout when he heard the young crown princess's cold voice slowly rise. Who instigated you 2 to detain me here? The faces of the 2 concubines were muddle-headed. They only felt that the cold voice was echoing in their heads. They couldn't help but answer, we were entrusted by our fellow villagers to create trouble in the imperial garden today. As long as we can detain a noble who is passing by, we don't need to do anything else. Tu Lang can handle the rest. Impossible! Prince Dawa shouted angrily, how could Tu Lang attack the crown princess without my orders? The 2 concubines' eyes were lifeless, but they said in unison, did Prince forget? It was you who told Tu Lang to protect us well. Once we encounter danger in the noble's hands, Tu Lang will naturally save us from danger. Prince Dawa's face turned even uglier. His face was yellow as shit. He opened his mouth but was unable to refute. The order was indeed given by him. This lustful prince of a barbarian tribe changed women as quickly as he changed clothes. Often, because he doted on his concubines, he wished that he could give them all the good things in the world. When he no longer doted on them, he would abandon them. The reason why he left Tu Lang with the 2 concubines this time was because 2 days ago, the 2 concubines came to him and cried, saying that the main wife made things difficult for them and their days were difficult. Therefore, he left Tu Lang by their side to protect them. Who would have thought that this would spoil things? What benefits did you 2 take from your fellow countrymen? Hand it over. The 2 of them were expressionless. They took out several bags of spirit coins from their inner worlds and placed them in front of the crowd along with 2 spirit tools. They were still kneeling on the ground, motionless. Prince Nava, the facts are here, and the goods are there, and the bribe is here. What else do you have to say? Prince Nuwa's face flickered back and forth like a rainbow. Arbor asked expressionlessly, one last question. Why did you have to attack here? Why did you have to lure her to the royal garden and prevent her from leaving? Was it just to have Tu Lang fight with her? Or did you have other motives? Sir Jojo turned around and met Duan Yu's eyes. Let's go. The 2 of them had just flown up nimbly when they suddenly felt a heavy gravity envelop them from midair. There was a huge bang under their feet, and the entire ground caved in instantly. Chapter 5008. The 2 dumbfounded concubines were the first to fall. Before he could even react, his body had already been pierced by several sharp knives from the ground with a poochie sound. The 2 of them widened their eyes in horror and died before they could even cry out. Prince Dewa was more agile. Although he immediately levitated into the air, the gravity above his head caused his body to sink down. He stabilized his sinking body with great difficulty and barely managed to stay afloat in the air. When he looked down, he saw rows upon rows of gleaming snow-white blades aimed at him uniformly. If he really fell down just now, he probably wouldn't have ended up well even if he had a defensive barrier. When Prince Dewa thought of this, he involuntarily shuddered, and his eyes swiftly looked in Duan Yu and Arbor's direction. He couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Where are they? His Majesty Tsangzhou and the Crown Princess of the Divine Province were both gone. Not only were those 2 people gone, but those royal maids and guards beside them were also gone. It seemed like only their barbarian tribe's group was affected by the gravity at the scene. What the heck was going on? Where are they? Prince Nua roared, but his body suddenly sank down. This guy paled and he hastily stabilized his body. The guards were currently channeling all the energy in their bodies to resist that gravity with bitter expressions, so how would they dare to speak rashly? When Prince Dewa saw that the guards were ignoring him, his face turned green with anger. He barely stabilized his body and roared, "What are you still standing there for? Hurry and clean up the blades below." Since the gravity couldn't be removed for the time being, what else could they do? They could only first destroy or fill up this pit of blades below. However, when Prince Dewa gave his order, everyone around him remained motionless with bitter expressions. It wasn't that they didn't want to clean up this pit of blades below, but that they couldn't move at all right now. Even speaking would affect the leakage of divine energy, let alone having them free up their hands to fill up the pit below. They were already having a hard time resisting the pressure and were struggling to hold on, so how could they have any other power to use? On the other side, the pitiful Prince Kawa felt the air in his chest dissipate a little after he finished roaring. His entire body was about to sink. He hurriedly placed his left foot on top of his right foot and gently stepped on it. He thought that he could go up 2 inches, but who would have thought he fell down a short distance again? Seeing that he was getting closer and closer to those sharp blades, his hair stood on end. How could the Emperor of Tsangzhou and the Crown Princess of the Divine Land disappear in the blink of an eye? They must have escaped when they saw that the situation was not good. How could they leave their guests in such a dangerous place? Prince Dewa of the barbarian tribe. A cold voice came from above. Prince Kawa forced himself to raise his head. After a long time, he finally saw the 2 figures hovering not far away. Weren't they the cunning Emperor of Tsangzhou and the Crown Princess of the Divine Land? He didn't see when these 2 people disappeared, and he didn't know when they appeared here again. Now that he was begging for help, his tone softened. Your Majesty of Tsangzhou, Crown Princess of the Divine Land, you two are finally here. Quick, give me a hand. Help is at the next stage. Crown Princess, please be clear. I definitely didn't do this matter of hunting you down. I have no enmity with you, so how could I bear to attack you, right? Chapter 5009. Prince Hua. Yes. Crown Princess, please tell me, Prince Dua said hurriedly. Are you convinced? Prince Hua was dumbfounded. Fuck, what do I have to submit to? This Crown Prince Consort is probably a lunatic. I'm asking you if you're convinced. I submit. Prince Kawa cursed inwardly. However, since he was under someone else's roof, he had no choice but to lower his head. Now that he had to rely on someone else to save him, he could only accept whatever they said. Compensation? Duan Yu's mouth twitched as a memory suddenly surfaced. Compensation. Otherwise, I will kill him. Go ahead and kill him. He's so stupid. He deserves to die. Hey, wait, what kind of compensation do you want? Fixed price, 100 pieces of low-grade magnetite for this dog's life. It was strange that he had heard the word compensation so many times. After not hearing it for so long, he actually missed it. Now that he heard it again, he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. As expected of a person, he would be so calm after receiving compensation. Just like him, when he heard the word compensation, he was completely unaffected. If Prince De Hua knew what this Tsang Prefecture Emperor was thinking right now, he would definitely spit in his face. Of course you wouldn't feel anything. It's not like I'm asking you to compensate me. The list of compensation is here. You just need to sign it. The faces of the guards from the barbarian tribe were all slightly distorted. Their prince was sinking lower and lower than they were. When they looked down, they saw that their prince had fallen to the level of their waists. His legs were dangling, and he was only a hair away from the sword in the pit. The most important thing was that they were suffocating under the weight of the gravity. They were holding back their strength and were unable to free up their hands to help. What are you still considering? The little stoic said with a taut face. This place is restricted by gravity and space. Someone set up a triple strength talisman matrix. If I don't help you, all of you will die. If we die in the Tsangzhou Imperial Palace, I'm afraid that His Majesty won't be able to answer to the barbarian tribe. Jojo, go ahead and do what you need to do. I'll handle whether you hand it over or not. Duan Yu immediately retorted. Prince Hua only felt that he could not take even half a breath in his heart. His whole body suddenly fell down. His face turned pale as he screamed in his heart, "It's over!" In the end, he suddenly felt his left arm being grabbed by something, and his body suddenly stopped. When he looked up, he was sweating profusely. It turned out that he had been entangled by a wooden vine. Beneath his feet, there was a gust of dense sword chi that was about to pierce through the soles of his feet. Prince Chaohua was so scared that he almost peed his pants. Cold sweat also appeared on his head. The little stoic expressionlessly asked again, "Compensation? Compensation? Compensate?" Prince Kawa was on the verge of breaking down. Why the fuck should I compensate? Who did I offend? Today's play had nothing to do with him at all. It was all those two concubines' fault for being greedy and not giving up on their evil intentions, causing him to be in this state. Sign it. The young crown princess tossed a scroll of compensation to Prince Kawa. With a curl, he dragged it from the air all the way to the ground. Prince Kawa's arm was held by the wooden vine, and he could barely move. He held back his tears and signed the form with trembling hands. He stamped his handprint and closed his eyes, unable to look at what was written on the paper. This was a prelude to emptying his little treasury. Arbor put away that scroll of paper and muttered to Duan Yu, "We'll be waging war with the Heavenly Fate Empire later on. Stockpile more supplies and money for the army's provisions." Chapter 5010. Phoenix. The Arch City is quite lively, huh? Chichen looked left and right, his gaze sweeping the streets several times. While he was looking at other people were also looking at them. The sudden appearance of two peerless beauties on the street was like a scenic sight, instantly attracting the gazes of all the passers-by. Hee. Suddenly, a woman with gaudy features swayed her hips as she walked past the two people. She daringly threw a coquettish glance at Emolien and even threw her floral handkerchief embroidered with peonies in front of the two people. The venerable peach blossom immortal walked over without looking sideways and stepped on the handkerchief in passing. "Pick it up, Emolien. I threw it to you." Emolien followed suit and stepped on it before leaving, her phoenix eyes chilly. "Keep it if you like it." "Humph, I'll definitely tell my Jojo later that another woman is winking at you." "That's for you." Ha. The venerable peach blossom immortal gave a very fake chuckle and rolled his eyes. "It's not funny at all." Emolien looked at him exasperatedly. She suddenly missed Duanyu a bit. Compared to this unreliable guy, Duanyu seemed to be more reliable in every aspect, and his brain was also more normal. Clang. The sound of a gong suddenly came from the side of the street, accompanied by a loud voice. "Debt collection by imperial decree." Emolien's ears twitched, and a trace of suspicion flitted through her mind. Why did these four words sound strangely familiar? Could it be a misconception? Clang. Debt collection by imperial decree. The debt collection team is now on a mission to the barbarian tribe to collect debts. The loud voice continued, 100 million spirit coins, 100 northern sea luminous pearls, 10,000 sets of special armor, 10,000 special spears. Shichin twitched his mouth as he looked in confusion at the small team walking past them. These people looked like Tsangzhou guards. Each of them was in high spirits, and their cultivation levels were truly not low. High cultivation did not equate to high IQ. This operation team looked like they were retarded. "Zilien, don't you think this routine is a bit familiar?" Emolien expressionlessly twitched his mouth. "It's Jojo's trick." Yuan Shichin was immediately amused. "That's great. We've really found the right path by accident. Jojo is here." Emolien's phoenix eyes also lit up. "It's with Duanyu. Let's go." "Where to?" "Naturally, I'm going to the Azure Palace." Emolien's voice was still there, but she had already drifted far away. The venerable peach blossom immortal waved his fan with a smile and quickly chased after her. "Who is this person?" Arbor knitted his brows and turned to look at Duanyu, who was sitting beside him. There was a person kneeling at the bottom of the steps. He was thin and didn't look very old, but because of his wrinkled skin he looked very old. The palace maid who poisoned you time and time again was sent by him. Arbor turned to look at the man kneeling before him. So the incident in the Imperial Garden was also his doing? Crown Princess, Crown Princess. I just said that I was wronged, Prince Nuwa exclaimed with a mournful face. Earlier he had carefully flipped through that 8-meter-long list and almost fainted after reading it. This little Crown Princess was truly a vicious person. She wanted to empty out their entire barbarian tribe. What are you wronged for? Weren't those two concubines who attacked your people? Yes, they were my people, but who are you? Chapter 5011. The little Crown Princess didn't want to pay attention to this Prince Yuwa with his low IQ and directly shouted at the gaunt man at the bottom of the steps. Prince Yuwa shrank back and very unwillingly sat back down in his seat. His shifty eyes glanced at Aunt Yuan Zhen's group. Earlier in the royal garden, Yuan Zhen, those palace maids, and ordinary royal guards were somehow rescued in that critical situation. They all disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Speaking of which, it was strange that the Tsangzhou Emperor and the Crown Princess of the Divine Province also appeared and disappeared mysteriously, disappearing one moment and reappearing the next. He simply didn't notice what was going on with them. Yuan naturally didn't know that the instant they were trapped in the gravity-binding talisman matrix, Arbor promptly made a decision and immediately brought Duanyu back to the star domain. She also swiftly stored Yuan Zhen and the others into a storage talisman, so how could Yuwa detect her movements? Moreover, the situation was critical at the time, and Yuwa and the others were struggling against that gravity at the first moment, so how could they have the time to notice them? By the time they noticed, The little stoic and the others had long disappeared. The little stoic definitely didn't come out later to save people, but to ruthlessly extort Prince Yuhua. Yuhua was too displeasing to the eye. Although he didn't participate in this matter, he had to take the blame for his two beloved concubines. Prince Yuhua was currently angrily glaring at the gaunt man at the bottom of the steps. He couldn't resist asking, "Who are you? Why aren't you replying? What methods did you use to bribe those two concubines of mine? Go in." Following this reprimand, another person was shoved inside by the royal guards. He knelt down next to the gaunt man with a plop, his head and face covered in blood. He was probably beaten up when he was resisting just now. The gaunt and elderly man looked back at him and continued to remain silent. Meanwhile, the Duke of East Mountain, Wu Heng, walked in with a group of royal guards. He cupped his hands at Duan Yu, who was sitting at the head of the table, and then led his men to retreat to the side. Duan Yu said dryly, "Marquis and Xingho, you've been exposed for plotting against the crown princess twice in a row, so it's useless even if you don't say a word." Duan Yu beckoned Yuan Zhen to the side. The latter, with a stiff face, slowly walked forward with a tray and put it in front of Xingho. He lowered his head and saw two small porcelain bottles on the tray. His eyelids twitched. "Don't blame us for not giving you a chance to argue." Duan Yu coldly stated, "There are only two paths before you right now. The first option was to tell the truth and commit suicide by taking poison. The second is to say nothing and let your 9 clans accompany you to the Yellow Springs. Don't think that you can fool people by sending all your siblings out of the city to the countryside." And Xingho suddenly raised his head and looked at the young emperor with a trace of disbelief in his eyes. "You caught them?" It had only been a short while. It was 3 days ago that he ordered the palace maids to poison him. It had been 3 days since his family left the imperial capital. Who would have thought that this heartless man would capture his sister-in-law's entire family? The corners of Xingho's mouth twitched slightly. This old man didn't do anything wrong. It's only right and proper to avenge my daughter. Arbor knitted his brows and sized him up. "Do I know you?" He had never seen this person before. What did he mean by avenging his daughter? What nonsense was this? What did this have to do with anything? Chapter 50:12. Just as Duan Yu was about to remind Jojo, Xingho shouted angrily, "Does the crown princess still remember Xiangshang?" The young crown princess was pondering where she had seen this person before, so she reflexively rubbed her stomach after being yelled at. She also retorted angrily, "What are you shouting for? Do you think you're in the right just because you have a loud voice?" Sir Jojo jumped in fright. "What a lunatic. That daughter of yours, I've never seen her before. You're crazy, right?" Duan Yu's mouth twitched. He really wanted to interrupt and tell the indignant Marquis and Xingho, "You only talk about Xiangchang, but the young crown prince consort really can't remember who they were. You have to talk about what happened between the two of them in order to evoke the young crown prince consort's memories most of the time. The young crown princess couldn't match a person's face to a person's name. She was face blind since she was young, so she improved a bit after she grew up, but her memory was truly terrible. So from another perspective, it was really not easy for the young crown prince consort to remember someone who was fortunate enough to be able to match their name. The young crown princess glanced back at Duan Yu in confusion. Why did this guy have such an indescribable expression? How could Xingho understand the little stoic? He only thought she was refusing to admit to harming Xiangchang in front of His Majesty. Tears streamed down his face as he shouted, "Arbor, you're actually so shameless. You dare to do something but don't dare to admit it? You and my daughter, Xiangchang, only had a small dispute during the experiential learning, but you had to fight to the point that you wouldn't stop until one of us dies. On Xiangchang's way back to Zhangzhou, you intercepted her and even cruelly murdered her. You deranged woman. Do you know that when my daughter was transported back to the estate, there wasn't a single piece of unharmed flesh on her body?" And Xingho's eyes emitted a cold glint. "I'm avenging my daughter, so shouldn't I kill you? When I complained to the late emperor, he wasn't willing to help me seek justice. So now I can only deal with you myself." Duan Yu couldn't resist ridiculing Xingho. How could the late emperor help you deal with the crown princess? That would be strange. Could the hand of the former emperor reach to the divine land to stir up trouble? Just for Xiangcheng, Sangzhou had to go to war with Shenzhou. Only your daughter's life was important, but what about the thousands of ordinary people suffering from the war? Forget it, I can't be bothered to ridicule him. I don't have long to live anyway. And Xingho repeatedly talked about the interceptions on the way back to Zhangzhou. Finally, the little crown princess's broken string was connected. She frowned and looked him up and down. The alchemist from the Royal Academy? The young crown princess's eyes grew cold as she said, when Feng Mulin was training, he summoned the three-colored spirit magpies to attack us as soon as he recovered his spiritual power. He injured the little fatty and tried to take my life? Anqing Marquis said angrily, my daughter has already paid the price for her willful actions. Hadn't she already been expelled from the academy? Why do you still refuse to let her go? What's wrong with me getting rid of those who have evil intentions towards me? If I let her go, who will let me go? Are you sure she won't go back and complain to you? Won't she cry and beg you for help? Will she turn over a new leaf and not cause trouble for me? The little stoic asked coldly. I originally didn't have any enmity with her, but she was muddle-headed and insisted on causing trouble for me everywhere. She didn't have the ability and was dealt with by me, yet you come to cry injustice. Indeed, she has you, her father, standing up for her. You can tolerate her, love her, and indulge her in whatever she does. Chapter 5013. My arbor doesn't have a father that I can rely on. My father is only an ordinary cultivator. Normally, he would never teach me to stir up trouble for no reason or scheme against anyone I don't like. My father isn't as resourceful as you, Lord Marquis. To be able to do as you please in a place like Azure Palace's inner court and meticulously plan and arrange such a big play. I was bullied for no reason, so I shouldn't cry out for injustice. I should accept it, I shouldn't retaliate, I deserve to be unlucky, right? Once I retaliated, all of you said that I retaliated too much, that I didn't handle it well, that I'm vicious, scheming, and filled with evil intentions. Yes, I'm a vile person who seeks revenge for the smallest grievance. Nonsense. Duan Yu was furious and couldn't resist tugging at her while shaking his head in disapproval. No need to waste words with this person. He's standing on his side and protecting the person he wants to protect, so he naturally feels that you're wrong and an eyesore. Marquis and Xingho. Duan Yu coldly looked at the thin man below the steps. That day, when we were training in Phoenix Grove, our cultivation and divine senses were temporarily blocked, so we needed to rely on pills to recover. Do you know what the first thing Xiang Chang did when she recovered her strength was? She killed Jojo and her companions. There wasn't any blood feud in the first place. Xiang Chang wanted to kill her own schoolmate because of some trivial matters, completely disregarding the Academy's friendship. Is there a problem with the Academy expelling her? This matter was caused by her own actions, so shouldn't she bear the consequences herself? Marquis and Xingho's face twitched, and he opened his mouth to refute when Xiao Kezi announced loudly from outside, Her Majesty the Empress Dowager has arrived. Duan Yu's brows involuntarily knitted together. This fake Empress Dowager née Wang had been well-behaved ever since she ascended the throne and never stirred up any trouble. Her Wang family had long died out, and she didn't have any power behind her. She was also very clear that if she wanted to continue this prosperous and peaceful life, she had to build a good relationship with the emperor. Relying on His Majesty to live was her best choice right now. Wang Shi ordered people to escort in a middle-aged eunuch with disheveled hair and covered in blood. When he saw the emperor, he hurriedly said, Your Majesty, people found this shifty-eyed eunuch in the backyard and wanted to escape. After asking, I found out that something big had happened to you. So, he quickly sent someone to escort him over. At the same time, the three little palace maids who were kneeling at the bottom of the steps saw the eunuch who was beaten beyond recognition. They were so scared that they didn't dare to look closely. Still not kneeling? A strong old mama stepped forward and kicked the eunuch's knees, causing him to kneel on the ground with a thud. Duan Yu looked meaningfully at this fake Empress Dowager. Although the fake Empress Dowager had not been in the palace for a long time, she was a smart person. She received the news so quickly and quickly found Eunuch Yang and brought him here. Not only could she quickly distance herself from him, but she could also put on a righteous front. It was a pretty good calculation. Speak, did you accept Marquis and Xingho's bribe and instigate the 3 palace maids to lure the crown princess to the imperial garden? Xiao Kezi immediately berated Eunuch Yang after Duan Yu signaled with his eyes. That Eunuch Yang couldn't help but tremble as he looked pleadingly at an elderly man kneeling behind Marquis and Xingho. It was I who asked Eunuch Yang for help, the elderly man said calmly with an indifferent expression. Chapter 50:14. Duan Yu was puzzled. You guys were able to set up an invisible gravity talisman matrix in the Imperial Garden? Not only that, but they also hollowed out the ground, buried sharp blades, and smeared lethal poison on them. As long as someone fell in, they would have a slim chance of survival. Since when did the head eunuch of Benevolence Palace have such great power? These things couldn't have been done in a day or two in the Imperial Garden. When the fake Empress Dowager saw the Emperor's puzzled gaze sweep over, she knew that he was still doubting her. She quickly smiled calmly and said, Your Majesty may not know, but although this Eunuch Yang is only a level 10 mystic cultivator, he has a contracted mystic beast, a groundhog. It can dig holes abnormally fast, and it doesn't even take an hour to dig a large hole in ordinary soft ground. When she said this, Eunuch Yang immediately collapsed to the ground like a deflated ball. The elderly man's earlier words actually completely confirmed that he had accepted a bribe and had selfishly helped outsiders dig holes in the Imperial Garden. The fake Empress Dowager's words were merely an additional explanation. Lord Marquis, I helped you so sincerely, but you actually, Eunuch Yang truly wanted to cry but had no tears. He didn't expect that the Marquis and his personal guards would bite him to death when things came to a head. Your Majesty, please spare my life. Eunuch Yang sprawled on the ground with tears streaming down his face as he wailed sorrowfully. This servant was momentarily blinded by greed and was blinded by greed. If it weren't for Lord Marquis tempting this servant with hundreds of millions of spirit coins, this servant wouldn't have. Marquis and Xingho is truly generous. Who would be able to resist being bribed with more than 100 million spirit coins? So, this matter made sense. Marquis and Xingho probably found the one surnamed Yang because he fancied that groundhog. It had a miraculous effect in digging holes and could coordinate with his own people to set up a formation. May I know this sir's name? You should be a fellow villager of Prince Nuwa's 2 beloved concubines, right? Duan Yu's eyes coldly swept over the elderly man behind Marquis and Xingho. This elderly man's face was still stained with blood, but it had already congealed into patches of dark red. Sir is a transcendent god realm cultivator, so why pretend to have been beaten and abused? Are you waiting for an opportunity? When Duan Yu said this, the fake Empress Dowager, who was originally standing next to Xingho, couldn't help but jump in fright. She promptly made a decision to hide behind the royal guards, her reaction very quick-witted. At this moment, the silent elderly man who had been kneeling on the ground the whole time slowly raised his head, and his lightning-like gaze flitted past Duan Yu and Arbor. Ma Wu, kill them. The elderly man's figure abruptly dashed toward Xiao Mu, and his firm and powerful claw swiped at her shoulder. No wonder Xingho didn't panic at all from the beginning to the end. Duan Yu couldn't help but curl his lips mockingly. So it turned out that he had brought a Transcendence Realm expert with him. Bang! Duan Yu's palm collided with his opponent's, and the latter was pushed back 3 steps. The elderly man named Ma Wu glanced at Duan Yu in astonishment, and his figure suddenly split into 2. It was so fast that Duan Yu only had time to change his expression. This old man actually had a corporeal clone. He, Jojo, dodged quickly. Duan Yu blocked the old man's attack, but he didn't have the time to care about the other clone. Duan Yu watched as the old man smiled sinisterly and his hand was about to grab Arbor's neck. A streak of black fire poured down from the sky. Chapter 50:15. It was so fast that no one had time to react. With a loud boom, it hit the old man's clone. Old man Ma Wu probably did not expect such a variable to appear in the air. Caught off guard, he was hit in one hit. The clone retreated dozens of steps with a grunt. He retreated from the long, wide steps to the flat ground. The old man stomped on the ground. It took him a lot of effort to stabilize himself. He lifted his head and stared at the figure with a sharp gaze. A black figure tore open the space in front of him in an instant and stepped out. His phoenix-like eyes were filled with coldness. The man's face was covered in a layer of cold frost. He exuded an intimidating aura. The pressure coming at him made old man Ma Wu widen his eyes in shock. "You!" Ma Wu had only uttered one word when the other party did not give him a chance to speak. He raised his hand and shot out 5 balls of black fire. They went straight for his face. The speed was so fast that the old man could not react in time. The 5 balls of black fire were already in front of him. Ma Wu took a deep breath. He spread his hands and released a burst of Saint power. The whirlpool-like power was like a tornado that swept away the clouds, blowing in all directions. The 5 balls of black fire were not affected at all. They were not blown away by him at all. Instead, they landed on his body. The black flames burned on Ma Wu's body in a low-key yet luxurious manner. Ma Wu froze. He quickly brushed his outer robe aside and threw it on the ground. At the same time, the 5 balls of black fire burned his outer robe to ashes. "What are you?" Ma Wu clenched his fists and was about to question him when he suddenly felt a burning sensation in his chest. When he lowered his head to take a look, his expression immediately changed and he couldn't help but shudder. He did not know when a ball of black fire had started burning on his chest. It had burned the front of his robe. The black fire danced on his pale skin. The black light flickered faintly. Old man Ma Wu was dumbfounded. Didn't he just activate the saint energy in his body and completely separate the 5 balls of black fire? Why was it would still be the same? The black flames were burning his skin and slowly spreading across his body in an unbridled manner. This was his materialized avatar. Seeing that it was about to be roasted into pieces by the black fire, Ma Wu naturally could not watch as his avatar was destroyed. Just as he was about to pounce, a light green vine shot out from the side and landed on his shoulder with a thud. A moon-white figure flashed and suddenly appeared beside him. A cold light flashed through her smiling eyes. "What? You want to win with numbers?" From beginning to end, Arbor, who hadn't moved an inch, was now staring unblinkingly at the 2 people at the bottom of the stairs. Now he glanced at him, then at the other. She looked at this and that, and after a while, she suddenly pinched Duan Yu's arm. "What did you see?" Duan Yu twitched his mouth in bewilderment. He coughed lightly and said, "You didn't see wrong. Mo Lien and Rotten Peach Blossom came out of the sacrificial sea abyss. Not only did these 2 people come out, but they were also very lively. It could be seen that they scared the transcendent realm elderly into a corner as soon as they came out." Arbor's small, expressionless face was taut as he stared at the 2 people below with his pitch-black eyes. The little emperor looked down at the 2 people with pursed lips and did not make a sound. Chapter 5016. Duan Yu couldn't resist glancing at her and grumbling in his mind, "How strange. Why doesn't Jojo have any reaction at all?" Arbor suddenly turned her head and extended a small paw to smack his hand. "You're still in a dream. No need to lie to me. Duan Yu, accept reality, Jojo. Those 2 swindlers have returned." On the other side, Mo Lien, who was using the black fire to entangle the old man's clone, turned her head and saw that the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal had already taken control of the old man's main body, so she ignored that Ma Wu. He quickly looked up at his expressionless wifey. His expression immediately turned bewildered with this look. Why did his wifey turn around and leave? At this time, the little stoic had already turned around, leaving him with the back of her head. Mo Lien hastily chased after her. When she passed by Duan Yu, she turned her head to glare fiercely at this guy. Duan Yu was baffled. "What did I do? Why did Mo Lien glare at me just now? Is Mo Lien crazy? Jojo ignored him, so why did he glare at me? Serves you right for Jojo ignoring you for 100 years. Who told you to dawdle, to be stupid, to be silly, To be stupid. You only have yourself to blame. Mo Lien hastily dashed to Arbor's side and hastily grabbed her sleeve. Wifey! Jojo! Xiao Mu was pulled around by him, and her pair of pitch-black almond-shaped eyes stared fixedly at him like this. She didn't move at all for a while. Jojo? Arbor suddenly extended a small fist and smacked Mo Lien's chin with a bang. Duan Yu was shocked and took pleasure in her misfortune. Good hit. Mai Chen was stunned and beamed with joy. Ha! Mo Lien actually got beaten up one day. It simply couldn't get any better. The little fellow suddenly pounced on him, pouncing on his body. Her little hand pinched his face a few times as she muttered, "Heh, you still want to turn into a nightmare to deceive people. See if I don't beat you to death?" It felt real to the touch. It felt like skin to the touch. In addition, her husband's indescribable face was so close to her that it felt too real. Don't try to lie to me. Arbor kicked him a few times. Over the past few days, there had been a lot of nightmares trying to grab her. In her dreams, they kept screaming at her. Sometimes, they even pretended to be Mo Lien's death to scare her. They made use of every opportunity during the day and night. Even if she sat there in a daze for a while, it was very likely that she would be tortured. It was simply abominable. Did he think Jojo was an idiot? Kill this nightmare impersonator who pretended to be Lotus. Dong 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 dong. Mo Lien was first hit on the chin, followed by 2 kicks to his body. At this moment, the little fellow's fists were like raindrops, repeatedly punching him back and forth. Mo Lien's heart instantly sank. He quickly reached out and hugged her tightly. He put on an expression that said, "Wife, go ahead and hit me. This husband can take it." He stared at her pitifully and said, "Wife, stop when you're satisfied. My hands will hurt." Arbor was stunned. He stopped and looked at him. Suddenly he pinched his chin. Mo Lien hissed and looked at his wife pitifully. "My chin is going to swell, Jojo." Arbor kicked him. This nightmare impersonator can even talk. Mo Lien, Jojo, it's your husband. Open your eyes and look carefully. Look at your husband. He can run, jump, and kiss. What kind of nightmare impersonator can be so smart? Don't. Sir Jojo's fist landed on someone's head. Mo Lien's mouth twitched inwardly, and he felt like weeping but had no tears. Chapter 5017. It's real. It's not a nightmare. It's a real person, Jojo. You beat me up for a long time just now. Don't you realize the difference between a nightmare and me? I'm alive and well. Do you think I'll let you off just because you're so handsome and act cute? Sir Jojo looked at him expressionlessly and did not speak for a long time. Mo Lien panicked. She turned to look at He Shurchen, who was floating over quickly. She pointed at him and said, "Look, the rotten peach blossom is here." "You're right. We both jumped out of the abyss of the sacrificial sea unscathed." Jojo look. "My husband is fine. The rotten peach blossom is also very good." As she spoke, the venerable peach blossom immortal floated over with a smile. He glanced at Mo Lien, who was acting cute and spinning in circles. Did she need to act cute to coax Jojo? Jojo hated cute things. The more she acted this way, the more counterproductive it would be. Look at him. He leaned forward and said with a grin, "Jojo, long time no see. Did you miss me?" Lady Jojo unhesitatingly gave him a punch, which landed squarely on his face. The latter's handsome face was instantly filled with confusion. "I'm peerless and unparalleled. How did I get beaten up before my good looks could be used?" Strange. Wasn't he supposed to beat up Mo Lien? Why did he get implicated? This was not right. It wasn't easy for them to reunite. Shouldn't Xiao Qiao be pitifully leaning over and crying to them? This? What kind of trick was this? Sir Jojo expressionlessly pulled out a pitch-black ferrule from his sleeve. Mo Lien's eyelids twitched. She hurriedly grabbed his wrist. "Jojo, your husband is here." Who are you hitting?" "You're lying to Jojo." Arbor shouted angrily and swung his ferrule at the venerable peach blossom immortal. Jojo's hand hurt from the beating just now. Suddenly, he remembered that he should use a ruler to beat people. It wouldn't hurt his hand, and it would make him feel more comfortable. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's mouth twitched, and he hopped toward Duan Yu in a panic. He kept shouting, "Jojo, that was merely a stopgap measure. I didn't intend to trick you into abandoning you." Arbor swung his ferrule at him. The pitiful venerable Peach Blossom Immortal could only raise his paw and accept the blow obediently. Then he shouted, "Ouch, ouch, ouch." She tricked Jojo into going down with her, but in the end, she abandoned Jojo halfway. Throw Jojo up there and use the barrier to block the way. Every single one of these things was their doing. Stinky liar. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal dashed to Duan Yu's side in a panic and hastily shoved Duan Yu in front of Arbor. "If I could do it all over again, I would still do the same. Your safety is the most important, so I can't abandon you." Compared to Emolien, what is Emolien? At this critical juncture of life and death, I must prioritize saving you. Emolien glared at him and retorted without a second thought. "Then why did you generously sacrifice yourself for a cause at the bottom of the abyss of the sacrificial sea? Why did you have to die for us? You even died for him?" Sir Jojo roared angrily. Duan Yu's mouth twitched. "Can't you two stop courting death?" At this critical juncture, would it kill you to go along with her and say a few soft words as expected? Sir Jojo was enraged and swung his ferrule at the two of them. Poor Duan Yu was merely trying to stop the fight, but he ended up getting beaten up more than the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal. There was simply no one else like him. If Sir Jojo attacked in anger, would you be scared? Chapter 50:18. The three of them instantly felt a bit desolate, especially when Ma Shurchin and Emolien looked at each other, feeling like they had courted death. If they hadn't foolishly spilled the beans just now, perhaps Jojo wouldn't have gotten so angry. Now that Jojo already knew that the two of them had encountered a life and death crisis in the abyss of the sacrificial sea, they probably had to confess honestly. Duan Yu wanted to cry. He was too baffled. After being scammed by these two frauds, Jojo was now beating up anyone he saw, including him. Retaliate? That was impossible even in their next life. If they didn't retaliate, the little fellow was quite ruthless. If they dodged quickly, they would even incur the little stoic's furious glare, accusing them of dodging. "You, hurry up and say something." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was just short of directly telling Emolien, "Bro, why are you being so reserved? Hurry and kneel down to beg for mercy, and we won't laugh at you. If Jojo says you're wrong, then you're naturally wrong. Hurry and admit your mistake, admit your mistake." Arbor suddenly paused and expressionlessly rubbed her stomach. When Duan Yu saw this, he quickly asked, "Did you use too much force earlier and your stomach hurts?" Arbor shook her head and coldly said, "Baby Mo said that when he comes out, he'll beat you guys up for me. He told me not to do it now because it's too tiring." Everyone looked at him in bewilderment. No, Baby Mo, who is it?" The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal secretly winked at Emolien. Shit, judging from Jojo's tone, she was quite familiar with this Baby Mo. Why did another weirdo appear by her side after not seeing her for more than a month? Emolien quickly walked up and grabbed Arbor's small hand. "Jojo, baby." Emolien's gaze followed her small hand down and landed on her stomach. Suddenly, a light bulb lit up in his mind, and he became excited. He grasped Xiao Mu's hand tightly in his palm as his gaze swept back and forth across her stomach. Xiao, is this Baby Mo, is it? Our children?" Arbor remained calm and asked with a straight face, "What do you think?" I am naturally overjoyed, Xiao. In his excitement, Emolien actually stuttered, Xiao, I'm really going to be a dad." Arbor was still expressionless as he said stiffly, "Indeed." The corners of the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's mouth twitched. She felt that the conversation between the couple was so serious that it was a little funny. Happiness came too suddenly. Prince Mo beamed with joy. Just as he was about to reach out and pick up his wife, he saw the little fellow slap the back of his hand. She said coldly, "You and I haven't reconciled yet. Don't come over and hug me." Emolien, everyone says that husband and wife fight at the head of the bed and reconcile at the end of the bed. Yet I insist on letting you know. The little stoic said solemnly, Me and you, the two of us. If you fight at the head of the bed, you won't be able to reconcile at the end of the bed. Emolien, I suddenly have a bleak feeling that I might have to sleep in the living room for several nights. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal turned his back and couldn't resist bursting into laughter. Fuck, as expected, he still liked to stay with the little stoic. There was always something to laugh at and joy at every moment. Even if he just looked at her like this, he was still very happy. He watched as his wifey suddenly turned and left after saying this, leaving the three people with the back of her head. Emolien couldn't resist reaching out and called out aggrievedly, "Wifey, don't go. Can't this husband accept his punishment?" Chapter 5019. Jojo. Emolien hastily leaped up and swiftly flashed to his wife's side. However, he saw that the little stoic had already stopped and turned back to meet his eyes. Humph! Xiao Mu harshly harumphed at him before trotting past him in a trot. Strange, why did she want to run away? The one who should run away, be guilty, reflect, and apologize was Emolien. It was the rotten peach blossoms, it was the two of them. Sir Jojo shouldn't run away. The little stoic stomped down the steps with a cold and solemn expression. Ma Wu, who had coincidentally fallen to the ground, was already struggling to crawl halfway up. Just as he opened his mouth to say, "You," the little stoic effortlessly stepped on his head. The little stoic treated him as a stepping stone and stepped over him without even looking at him. She walked to Xingho, who had collapsed on the ground. "You're called Xingho?" the little crown princess asked coldly. Everyone couldn't help exasperatedly looking at each other. Xingho was merely a title, right? How could his name be called Xingho? However, forget it, whatever the little stoic said was the truth. Why didn't you answer when I asked you a question? The little crown princess impatiently circled Xingho and paused to look down at him. Xingho snorted and collapsed on the ground dejectedly. Suddenly he laughed loudly. This old man overestimated himself. He didn't expect that the Transcendence Realm elderly Ma Wu would have no chance of victory in front of His Majesty. No. If those two hadn't suddenly arrived, perhaps Ma Wu and His Majesty would still have a chance. But now, the situation was hopeless. Xingho closed his eyes, completely unable to see any hope. He could only bury his daughter's grudge like this. He was unwilling, indignant, and resentful. The little stoic said, "Hey," and looked down at Xingho's fluctuating expression. She impatiently said, "Didn't you want to avenge your daughter?" "I'll give you a chance to avenge your daughter," Arbor said dryly. She didn't think that she was wrong to give the order to kill Xiang Chong. After all, if someone offended her, she had to fight back. The other party's skills were not as good as hers, so he could only admit that he was unlucky. But looking at Xingho's tearful appearance, he felt that he couldn't erase his old father's sincerity. Thus, he said, "How about this? I'll have a fair fight with you. Life and death are up to fate. What do you think?" Ma Wu moved his body and stumbled forward a few steps. Before he could get close to the little stoic, he was swatted away by Zhichen, who suddenly flashed in front of him. The old man had been suppressing a mouthful of blood for a long time. At this moment, he could not help but spit it out. "Little girl, you're going too far." She clearly knew that with so many helpers around her, it was impossible to achieve a fair competition. As long as she was injured in the slightest, would the three people in front of them let them go? Anger flashed through Ma Wu's eyes. The Marquis's cultivation is not high. Naturally, he is no match for the Crown Princess. Crown Princess, if you want to compete, there is no harm in competing with this old man. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't resist snickering. "What are you saying? You're a transcending divinity realm who concealed your presence and hid in Songzhou. You still have the face to ask to compete with Jojo? You're a damn old man who lived for over 100 years, yet you still have the nerve to ask? Do you think you'll gain face by winning by picking a little girl to compete with?" Mo Lian felt that as her husband, it was time for him to work hard to perform. Chapter 5020. Therefore, he hurriedly floated to his wife's side and smiled fawningly at her. "Wife, your husband will beat him for you." Your husband will definitely beat this old man in front of you into a pig's head. Ma Wu stood with his hands behind his back in a huff. Flames of anger danced in his old, dim eyes. Marquis in Xingho is my benefactor. I am willing to give up my life for the Marquis. If you insist on interfering, then this old man has nothing to say about the grudges between others. Mo Lien laughed in anger when she heard this. Others? Grudges between others? Old man, not only is your brain not good, there is something wrong with your eyes. This is my wife. I took over my wife's business and helped my wife beat people up. How did it become someone else's business? Your brain is not clear. I don't want to waste my breath on you. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was speechless. Mo Lien's words seemed to make sense, but in Xingho and Ma Wu's disdainful gazes felt as if they were looking at an idiot. What a sanctimonious person repaying a debt of gratitude. Arbor sneered coldly as his gaze swept across their faces. Ma Wu frowned and covered his chest with one hand. What? To put it bluntly, isn't this matter caused by you, the crown princess? If you were magnanimous enough and not so vicious, you would not have sent people to kill Princess Xiangchang on her way back to Cangzhou and let her die an unnatural death. If the princess had not died, the Marquis would not have come to find trouble with you, and I would not have made you my enemy. Arbor could not help but laugh. They seemed to have all the logic in the world. This Mr. Mao? You guys truly have double standards. Xiao Mu coldly curled her lips at the two people. When you accuse others of being vicious, why don't you think about yourself? When you were killing people in the Imperial Garden, did you think about sparing the lives of those two concubines? No. You bribed the two concubines and gave them some money and assets in exchange for their lives. You planned to kill both them and me in the gravity restraint rune array since the very beginning. You didn't intend to let any of the innocent people here go, and now you're telling me that you're vicious? Tell me, one must be broad-minded when dealing with matters? Arbor sneered. It turns out that the words broad-minded have been used to demand others from the beginning to the end. Us. Ma Wu was at a loss for words. Indeed, there was no way to refute it because it was the truth. When they attacked, they didn't intend to let anyone live. The old man hurriedly glanced at his master, Xingho. At this time, Xingho was sitting on the ground, as if all his bones and strength had been sucked out. He couldn't see any hope in front of him. He had lost. He had lost everything from head to toe. Whether it was a plot or an assassination, he had tried both, but he was no match for the little crown princess in front of him. It seemed that the little crown princess in front of him was not an existence that could be defeated by a few people he randomly assigned. Ma Wu saw that he was in a daze and hurriedly called out to him. Old Xingho came back to his senses, and a trace of coldness hung on his hazy face. Ha! Suddenly, a series of strange laughter rolled out from his throat. He sat on the ground in a daze and did not move at all. Chapter 5021. What are you laughing at? The atmosphere in the main hall was not pleasant. When Arbor saw Xingho, that old geezer, sitting motionlessly on the ground and playing dead after his challenge, he became even more displeased. Was he going to fight or not? Why was he just sitting there and laughing like an idiot? Arbor was about to roar at Xingho when he heard the clanging of weapons from outside the hall. Mo Lien frowned and seemed to have recalled something. She quickly turned to Duan Yu and said, "Tell your men to stop. There are 4 servants outside that I took in from the abyss of the sacrificial sea. There's also a human snake and Chichuan from the Shun residence. Tell them to stop fighting." If it weren't for the sudden sounds of fighting, Mo Lien might have already thrown Shen Wu and the others to the back of her mind and completely forgotten about them. It couldn't be helped. Ever since he saw his wife for the first time, he couldn't take his eyes off her. Right now, there was only his daughter-in-law in his eyes, heart, and mind. At this moment, his small eyes kept glancing at his wife's small belly. His heart was filled with joy, apprehension, anticipation, and melancholy. All kinds of emotions came one after another. That gaze was so intense that it was impossible for Lord Xiao Qiao to ignore him. Sir Jojo proudly turned his head away. Mo Lien quickly shuffled up and stealthily moved to his wife's side. He tugged at her sleeve. Jojo, hubby missed you so much. These days and nights, hubby has been thinking about you and worrying about you. I didn't have any appetite for food or drink. My heart is especially miserable. Arbor harumphed with a stiff expression on his face, resolutely refusing to give him any response. The little crown princess pursed her lips, and her gaze shifted to the entrance. She saw the first person to enter, dragging a 2-meter-long snake tail behind him as he slithered across the floor. The little crown princess was startled, and her eyes abruptly widened. Wasn't this that berserk sage beastman snake? Why was he tailing Jojo's Lien the entire time? From the looks of it, this group of people seemed to be very familiar with each other. Where was the appearance of those who fought with their lives on the line? Xiao Mu was puzzled as she looked at the human snake in bewilderment. She remembered this stinky snake all too well. Back then, at the entrance of the sacrificial sea, he had fought with it. It was a huge battle, and the berserk saint beast was almost invincible. Zualanshan's gaze couldn't help but shrink. He didn't know why, but when he saw the little girl's gaze sweep over, he only felt his tail stiffen. The scales on his tail that had been cut by the Fushi greatsword previously seemed to be reflexively hurting at this moment. Zualanshan instinctively hid behind Emolien and muttered softly, "Take care of your wife." Look, isn't she glaring at me?" This little girl's eyes were sharp, and she was not an ordinary person. Zualanshan would never admit defeat. He felt that he could not meet the little girl's sharp eyes. With the pressure that he imperceptibly released, it was impossible for it to not affect this stoic-faced little girl in front of him in the slightest. Zualanshan's eyes flickered, and he nodded slightly at the little stoic from a distance. Truly, one can wear out iron shoes in a fruitless search only to find it without any effort. "We meet again, little girl." Originally, he wanted to say, "What a coincidence, little girl. It's a small world and we meet again." However, the words that came out of his mouth were completely wrong. The little stoic even took out 100 attack talismans without another word and directly threw them at him. Chapter 5022. Zualanshan was a bit stupefied, and his slight smile froze on his face. No, that wasn't it. Fuck, was the little stoic sick? He greeted her with a smile. He had already expressed such friendly intentions to her, so why the heck did she attack him? Was there still justice in this world? Where did justice exist? Where was justice? Zualanshan hurriedly sent Emolien a pleading look for help. The latter couldn't resist covering her face with her hand and twitching her mouth. She had just called out Charl when the 100 or so attack talismans crashed towards Zualanshan without any regard for their lives, making whooshing noises. They formed a circle of talismans in front of Zualanshan and fluttered up and down. "Stay your hand. This old man didn't come here today to fight with a junior like you. You're very good. I've already remembered you." Shen Wu hastily went up to persuade him. "As senior, you should speak less. Really, your words are exceptionally infuriating and grating on anyone's ears." Zualanshan originally wanted to curry favor with Charl and say that her cultivation was excellent at such a young age, but the moment he spoke, his tone changed. Arbor glowered at him and thought, "You stinking snake, I haven't settled the score with you for last time's matter, yet you actually dare to remember me? You want to settle the score with me in the future, right? I'll kill you." Once the little stoic's vicious thoughts arose, the 100 or so attack talismans flying around the snake instantly cracked at the same time, and the power of the attack talismans surged out and rushed straight for his face. This was a sign that she was going to blow up the snake's head. Zualanshan's expression darkened, and he repeatedly stomped his foot to summon Emolien. "Emopunk, what's wrong with your wife? I've already said so many nice things, so why is she still hitting me?" He didn't forget that this fellow used an ancient holy weapon at the entrance of the undersea abyss and almost severed his snake tail. Emolien glanced at him speechlessly. "You said a string of nice things? Are you kidding me?" Crown Prince Emo stealthily rolled his eyes and very consciously moved to the side to give way. If his wife wanted to beat up a human snake, then he had to let her beat him to her heart's content. At the crucial moment, he had to make a move. Helping his wife beat up the human snake until even his parents couldn't recognize him was a perfectly justified action. Bratimo, why don't you say it Io, Iya? The snake man shouted, you Io? He hastily put on a godly armor helmet and glared at the little stoic in exasperation through the layer of godly armor. Arbor waved his hand and summoned a thunder flash. He clenched his fists and was about to leap forward. Snake Man hastily shouted, facial paralysis. We are on the same side, on the same side. At that time, the little stoic had already rushed in front of the human snake, and the thunderclap sword in her hand emitted wisps of lightning. Wearing his helmet, Snake Rider shrank his neck and hurriedly shouted, Stop! I admit my mistake. The little stoic's thunderclap sword was held horizontally above his head. She glanced at him blankly and stopped her slashing motion with an odd expression. What did you say? Snake Man coughed and shouted irritably, This old man admits his mistake. I regret that I was tricked into going berserk. Now, we're considered on the same side, so don't hit this old man again. Sir Jojo was puzzled. He didn't put away his thunderclap sword, but his eyes glanced in the direction of his husband and rotten Peach Blossom. What was going on? Was this coward before him still the sacred beast that displayed invincible might and swept away all the members of the dragon clan with a flick of its tail? Chapter 50-23. Arbor put away the thunderclap sword and silently glanced at the human snake. She called out in confusion and asked crisply, What's your name? Zwalanshan reflexively replied, Zwalanshan. After saying that, he couldn't resist glaring at the little lady. He was actually unable to resist the little stoic's shout. GGC. Shinwu, Zhou Darong. Several feeble voices immediately popped up one after another. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't help but cover his face with his hands. Qiao Qiao's roar had intimidated the others and they all reported their names together. Speaking of which, this was truly hilarious when Arbor heard those feeble cries. She turned to look in Shinwu's direction. GC, old Zhou, and the other three were very tactful and quickly jogged forward to respectfully salute Arbor. Greetings, mistress. Arbor peeked at Emolien. Emolien quickly leaned over with a joyful expression. Jojo, these are hubby's new subordinates. Arbor glanced at him with mixed feelings before turning to leave. She clasped her hands behind her back, pursed her lips, and trotted away. Emolien turned to look dumbfoundedly at the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, who was rejoicing in her misfortune. Rotten Peach Blossom, what's wrong with Jojo? Isn't it obvious? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal didn't conceal his sympathy and disdain. Jojo doesn't want to talk to you, and Jojo doesn't like you. Jojo is angry at you. When he said the last sentence, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal even guffawed loudly. That gloating expression made Emolien's fists itch. On the other side, Duan Yu quietly instructed the personal guards to handcuff the limp in Xingho and Ma Wu with special shackles before transferring them to the dungeon. After he finished speaking, Duan Yu turned around and looked at Emolien seriously. Come out. Prince Emo strolled over with a puzzled expression. Before he could speak, he heard the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal calling out from behind them, Duanyue, don't leave yet. Have someone bring 2 pots of good wine over. I'm a little hungry. Quick, treat us well. Duanyu walked out of the hall and stood still. Emolien followed him out and whispered, If you have anything to say, you can't say it inside. Before he could finish speaking, he suddenly saw Duanyu turn around and pull out a 3-foot-long sword, stabbing it at Prince Mo without a second word. With a flash of silver light, the crown prince moved quickly and leaped onto the roof. Duanyu pursed his lips and remained silent. With a flick of his sleeves, he leaped onto the eaves and attacked Emolien with the sword in his hand with increasing ferocity. Clang, clang, clang. The long swords clanged and clanged. This sound immediately attracted the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal from inside the hall. When he looked up and saw this scene of swords clashing, his jaw nearly dropped. He hastily followed behind and shouted as he ran, Hey, you two, I told you to get wine. Why did you start fighting? Although the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal didn't understand the situation, He could see that although their attacks were fierce, they didn't show any killing intent. Clearly, they were just playing around with each other. Therefore, he wasn't particularly nervous and merely followed the two people flying back and forth on the roof. He ran and ran all the way into another court. Through the long lattice window in the bedchamber, he saw the little stoic lying against the window. She had wrapped herself up like a small cocoon and was expressionlessly sleeping soundly. Chapter 50-24. The two of them flew back and forth on the eaves outside the hall and fought for nearly 4 hours. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was about to doze off from boredom and could only sit aggrievedly under the little stoic's window. He couldn't resist rolling his eyes as he watched the two of them fight. He would occasionally call out, "Stop fighting," but he knew that the two of them wouldn't hear him at all. What was going on with these two fellows? They had just met, yet they were already fighting. Finicky, annoying, mentally ill. How did Jojo fall in love with this kind of emollient? He really couldn't figure it out no matter how much he thought about it. She didn't seem to be any better. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal glanced at the two of them on the roof and couldn't resist rolling his eyes while propping up his chin. "Stop acting. Jojo fell asleep long ago and can't see." The two of them exchanged several hundred moves before swiftly flying to another eve. Soon after, they stopped and silently looked at each other. "You slashed me 8,972 times with your sword just now. Shameless." "You didn't lose out either." Duan Yu expressionlessly said, "You attacked 9,103 times, and your attack speed far surpasses mine." Mo Lien directly threw Raven Moon in his hand onto the eaves, allowing it to dangle unsteadily between the cracks between the tiles. On the other side, Duan Yu also did the same and threw his sword. The two of them rested for less than a minute before simultaneously flying forward and punching each other with their fists. "You?" The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't resist jumping up and widening his beautiful eyes as he muttered to himself, "Can you two be a bit more mature?" They fought from sunset until the dead of the night. "I'm freaking so hungry." Most importantly, he simply didn't know why these two lunatics were fighting each other to vent their frustrations. Taking a deep breath, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal tried his best to put on a perfect smile. He raised his voice and roared at the two of them, "You two idiots, stop." When Arbor woke up, she was a bit dazed. She flipped over and thought for a few seconds, and a hint of panic gradually appeared on her face. She hastily got off the bed and stomped on her shoes in a flurry. With her head full of disheveled hair, she was about to run toward the door. The door to the hall creaked as someone suddenly pushed open a crack from the outside. Mo Lien's face, accompanied by a faint ray of morning light, suddenly entered her sight. The little stoic's eyes abruptly brightened. It seemed like she wasn't dreaming yesterday. Mo Lien and Rotten Peach really did return. When she woke up just now, her mind couldn't quite wrap itself around it. She thought that she had been dreaming in a daze last night, and she was even flustered about whether the Mo Lien she saw last night was real or an illusion. "I won't go anywhere in the future and will stay with wifey." The little stoic expressionlessly looked at him, her pitch-black eyes staring fixedly at him for a long while. Slap. Prince Mo twitched his mouth. He felt that his wifey's slap was quite painful, and he looked down at his pitiful hand. Sir Jojo harumphed, "Don't think that you can reconcile with me just by acting cute." She dug around in her sleeves and suddenly pulled out a handmade booklet. She slapped it on Emolien's hand. "Copy!" Emolien's mouth twitched. "I came back too late from working overtime today. I'm sleepy, so I'll sleep first. I'll wake up tomorrow morning to catch up on 2 chapters. Chapter 50-25. At this time, the little stoic had already put on her coat and expressionlessly went to wash up. She left behind her husband, who was dazedly holding a handwritten manuscript with an inexplicably disheveled expression. He stood by the bed and glanced aggrievedly at her departing figure. It was only after Arbor walked past him that she curled her lips, revealing a secret smile. Jojo's small stoic face almost couldn't remain taut earlier. If she laughed out loud in front of that guy now, he would definitely take advantage of her. He would definitely take advantage of every opportunity to make up and ask for hugs. Jojo wouldn't fall for his trick, and he definitely wouldn't be tricked by Jojo's lotus. While Arbor was washing up and wiping her face, she secretly peeked at Emolien. This guy was like a pitiful little thing as he walked to the table with the handwritten manuscript she gave him and also secretly peeked at her. The two of them just happened to meet each other's eyes while sneaking back and forth. Prince Mo's spirits immediately roused, and he burst into laughter. He quickly ran to her and said, "Wife, you were peeking at me." Arbor rolled his eyes at him. "Misconception." "No, there's no misconception. You were peeking at your husband just now. Go copy it." Sir Jojo grumpily roared at him. Prince Mo drooped his head listlessly and strode toward the table, but he couldn't stop turning back to glance at his wife. "Jojo, can your husband copy it once? Once? In your dreams. Copy it 100 times." The little fellow gave the final word, not caring about her husband's bitter expression at all. Serves him right. Who asked him to lie to Jojo all day long? Who asked him to cheat his father all day long? This was the punishment he deserved. Prince Mo flipped open the first page of the handbook, and there were 5 large words on it. Quotes from the little emperor. The Crown Prince. On the second page, there were only a few words. Everything Jojo says must be obeyed. As the Crown Prince copied, he thought, I listen to everything my wife says. How can I not listen? The more he copied, the more Crown Prince Mo smiled faintly. What was written in the book? When there was a conflict between Jojo's wishes and his own, he had to listen to Jojo. What do you mean? Climb a mountain of swords or plunge into a sea of fire? Bring your Jo with you wherever you go? He even said that if you ever leave Jojo behind again, you won't be able to speak to Jojo for 100 years. This is too cruel, Emolien thought to herself. How many 100 years can a person have? Not being able to talk to Jo for 100 years was such a sad thing. When the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal knocked on the door and entered, the miserable Crown Prince was only at the 58th copy. Sheets of white paper floated on the ground. Lines of words were written on them like floating clouds, and the strokes were like dragons and snakes. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was stunned. He did not know what was going on in this room. He bent down to pick up a piece of paper and looked at it. Immediately he burst out laughing. Heavens, this scene, coupled with His Highness the Crown Prince's embarrassed handsome face, was so comical and hilarious. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal shuffled through the door. He walked around the several sheets of white paper on the ground and walked to Arbor with a grin. Good morning, Jojo. Let Emolien copy here. Let's go eat breakfast. Prince Mo glared at him accusingly. You rotten peach blossom who hit me while I'm down. You actually dared to slander me in front of my wife and in front of me. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and suddenly made a move that Emolien found familiar. He pulled out a small booklet from his sleeve. He directly slapped it on the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's hands. The little stoic roared at him energetically, Copy. Chapter 5026. The background music instantly turned into Emolien's ha-ha laughter. Her gloating laughter nearly overturned the roof. What was this called? This was called being happy to see someone unlucky. In any case, she was already unlucky, so there was no harm in dragging someone down with her. Ha-ha, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal glared at Emolien exasperatedly, only to hear the little stoic roar at him, Copy it 100 times. She then abandoned the two and pattered out of the door, minding her own business to find breakfast. Lord Venerable Immortal's current mood was, fuck, fuck, fuck. He didn't expect that when he ran over to call his Charl for breakfast, the heartless Charl would leave him here and copy it along with His Highness the Crown Prince. What the heck was this? Once Arbor walked out of the hall, she scanned her surroundings. She then waved at the two little royal maids who were passing by. What happened? Why was it that the surrounding vegetation seemed to have been flattened by someone overnight? Everywhere was a barren expanse. She remembered that there used to be a patch of small pomegranate flowers blooming here. The two little royal maids opened their mouths uneasily, but they didn't dare to speak casually. Instead, they looked at each other. Speak the truth. Replying Crown Princess, last night, His Majesty and the Crown Prince of the Divine Province had a big fight here. The little stoic was taken aback. She then responded with an "oh," and swiftly ended the topic. She waved at the two. Lead the way. The two little royal maids. One of the rather quick-witted royal maids immediately felt that the little crown princess probably wanted them to lead the way to find His Majesty. Right, she was just that quick-witted. Even though the crown princess was expressionless, the two of them inexplicably felt that His Majesty might be in trouble. When Arbor found Duan-yu under the two little royal maids' lead, Duan-yu was currently talking to the dispirited Prince of Dawa. Arbor only pretended not to see Prince of Dawa's bitter and unlucky appearance. She walked over on her own. Duan-yu's eyes involuntarily brightened when he saw her, and he said with a smile, "Jojo, there's breakfast." He noticed that Jojo paused in the middle of taking something out of his sleeve. He stopped talking involuntarily. Arbor stuffed the book back into his sleeve and glanced at Prince Kawa, who was looking at him with a bitter expression. "What else do you want?" "Crown Princess, about the compensation, can we discuss it again?" He was so worried that he couldn't sleep well that night. He got up early in the morning and went to Zhangzhou's emperor to cry and beg for mercy. She really hoped that what happened yesterday was just a dream. The little crown princess' 8-meter-long list had the intention of emptying the entire barbarian tribe. Sob, sob, sob. The little crown princess waved her small hand and shouted angrily at Chao Hua, "Let's talk about this later. You can leave now." Prince of Dawa was taken aback, but he quickly nodded and bowed. Yes, then this humble prince will take his leave first." The little stoic pursed her lips after shooing Chao Hua away. Duan-yu asked with a smile, "Why did you change your mind?" The little stoic ignored him and took out the little emperor's book of sayings from her sleeve, stuffing it into his hand. "Copy 30 times. As a precaution." Duan-yu looked at her in bewilderment, but the little stoic ignored him and ran off to enjoy the sumptuous breakfast that had already been placed there. Duan-yu flipped open the first page of the book. The little emperor's book of sayings. Chapter 50-27. Thankfully, Jojo was quick-witted. When she was writing the little emperor's quotations, she repeatedly copied 5 copies. In the future, whoever didn't listen to Jojo would copy it 1,800 times, copying it until they were drunk and begging their grandparents. Arbor puffed up his cheeks and ate the pastries after eating the porridge. After eating the pastries, he scooped a bowl of porridge. Less than an hour later, the pitiful Prince Mo and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal came over. When they saw the white paper spread out on the ground inside the pavilion, they both excitedly leaped forward. After glancing at the expressionless Duan-yu, they looked at each other and couldn't resist teasing. What is this? There are so many pieces of white paper on the ground. Could it be that Duan-yu was punished to copy? They each copied it 100 times. The little emperor, who was sitting upright and drinking tea, exposed the two when he heard this. "You still want to mock Duan-yu? You two are in the same boat, but each of you copied 70 times more than Duan-yu. Mock your sister." Prince Mo and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal both showed bitter expressions. Duan-yu snorted and glanced at them. "Heh, I thought you two didn't copy. It turns out that you copied more than twice as much as me." The Crown Prince, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, twitched his mouth and coughed lightly before forcefully changing the topic. "Oh, right, we picked up a light coagulation mirror in the seabed abyss earlier." As he spoke, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal hastily sent Mo Lien a look. The latter immediately understood and reached out to summon a storage talisman, pulling out a bald-headed photon brain brat. The moment the light coagulation mirror Holy Spirit appeared, Arbor sensed his stomach heating up in response. Baby Mo had a reaction to the light coagulation mirror, so Arbor sensed it. At this time, the light coagulation mirror Holy Spirit also sensed it and turned around. After sizing up Arbor, its round eyes were stern as it declared righteously, "Woman, Lord Guangguang has never been one to be bewitched by lust. Don't use your beauty to try and tempt Lord Guangguang to contract with you." Bam. Just as it finished speaking, someone knocked its head. The light coagulation mirror Holy Spirit clutched its head in exasperation and turned around to glare at Emolien. Insolent. A junior like you is being so rude to Lord Guangguang again. Emolien was too lazy to listen to his tone. She directly picked him up and brought the light congealing mirror Holy Spirit, whose 2 short legs were swaying left and right, to Arbor. Jojo, wait a minute. Before Emolien could finish speaking, he was hastily interrupted by the light condensing mirror. Hurry up and let Master Guang get off the ground. The light congealing mirror Holy Spirit hurriedly swung its legs and kicked in the air. The corners of Emolien's mouth twitched. She exchanged a glance with the expressionless Charles and loosened her grip, throwing the light congealing mirror Holy Spirit away. The sacred spirit of the light condensing mirror howled before pouncing over to hug Xiao Xiao's leg. It climbed up along the way and raised its small hand high up. Suddenly it pressed itself against Xiao Xiao's stomach. Arbor was expressionless. He lowered his head and glanced at the light congealing mirror Holy Spirit. What are you doing? This strange Holy Spirit was like a retard. With one hand pressed against her stomach, its eyes were shining with a strange light. It was as if it could see through her stomach that there was some kind of treasure inside. Its dog eyes were so bright that it almost made people unable to look at it. Ha! The sacred spirit of the light condensing mirror suddenly burst into laughter. It stroked Xiao Mu's stomach with its small hand as it muttered, "Truly, one can wear out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it by sheer luck." The ears of the saint-level orc serpent who was walking along the path suddenly twitched. He thought to himself, these words sound very familiar. Chapter 5028. Arbor glanced expressionlessly at the light congealing mirror and raised her hand to pull it away from her, tossing it to the side in passing. The light congealing mirror's Holy Spirit scrambled up from the ground and jumped up and down, shouting, "How dare you! You're not allowed to be so rude to Sir Guangguang." Arbor narrowed her eyes at this fellow, sizing it up from head to toe. Yet she saw the light congealing mirror's Holy Spirit take out a small mirror and throw it at her without a second word. "What are you doing?" Emolien saw it clearly and furrowed her brows. She quickly raised her hand to stop it. However, the mirror condensed into a beam of light and rushed over with incomparable speed. Like a flowing light, it passed through his open 5 fingers in an instant. It entered the depths of Arbor's forehead with a whoosh. Arbor's body swayed and she retreated 2 steps. Startled, Crown Prince Emo hastily dodged to the side to support her. "Jojo." Emolien grasped her hand and stared at her, asking repeatedly, "How is it? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Did this light congealing mirror barge into your conscious?" This abominable light congealing mirror actually dared to be so impudent and barge straight into the depths of Jojo's conscious. At this time, Duan Yu and Hichin also hastily flashed to Arbor's side. "How is it?" This light congealing mirror wasn't some mortal-grade mystic weapon. It was a sacred weapon passed down from ancient times. It wasn't man-made but a natural sacred weapon that had been polished over many years and soaked in time. Once this kind of sacred weapon entered the conscious to contract, it would definitely consume a lot of mental energy and divine consciousness. If something went wrong in a moment of carelessness, it would cause the conscious to shake and become unstable. The 3 of them nervously stared at Arbor, who raised her hand to support her head and shook it. The little stoic glanced at them blankly before shaking her head again and saying, it seems fine. Take a look at your conscious again." As soon as Emolien finished speaking, the other 2 hurriedly nodded in agreement. Arbor quickly used his inner vision, and his expression became even stranger. She glanced at the 3 of them and muttered, "I took a look. There doesn't seem to be that mirror in my conscious." "What?" Ma Shurchin turned around and grabbed the kid who was kicking his legs and screaming. She snapped, "Tell me, what the hell did you do? You rushed into Jojo's conscious. Are you hiding and planning to secretly do something bad?" The light condensing mirror Saint Spirit fumed, "Nonsense. What can Sir Guangguang do?" The little rascal pushed the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's hand away and paced back and forth in front of the four people for a while. He turned around and smiled with his hands behind his back. "Don't be nervous, woman. Lord Guangguang won't harm you." Arbor resisted the urge to beat this little devil up and said expressionlessly, "Why can't I find you when you enter my consciousness?" "Who said I entered your conscious?" The little devil proudly raised his chin, looking down on Arbor. "Woman, I won't contract with you. It's useless even if you beg your grandparents and beg Sir Guangguang 18,000 times." The child raised his chin and smiled smugly. "This lord already has a contractor now and is stronger than any of you. With this lord's support in the future, your path will naturally be smooth and bright." Sir Guangguang paused and suddenly laughed maniacally at the sky with his hands on his hips. "Can I hit him?" Xiao Mu tried to restrain herself, but in the end she couldn't resist gritting her teeth and asking quietly. Chapter 50-30. This mirror was strange. Why was it nowhere to be seen even though it had clearly charged into Jojo's conscious? She had to carefully observe this matter, Mo Lien inwardly mused. She might as well have the sapling Qiuqiu escort that thing into the star domain and guard it closely. As long as this thing wanted to harm his Jojo, he wouldn't let it off even if it looked like a child. A cold glint flashed through Mo Lien's eyes. Arbor coughed lightly and said, "Don't be nervous, I feel nothing." This light congealing mirror had indeed charged into her conscious earlier, but it had already disappeared without a trace when she was far away, as if it had never come or stayed there. It seemed that Sir Guangguang's words weren't completely unreliable. At the very least, its contractor should be someone else. Duan Yu couldn't help but have a strange expression. "This is the first time I've seen a sacred spirit disdain Jojo." Arbor thought that wasn't the case. She was a phoenix egg, a bastard, who fought to contract with her. When had she ever been disdained by a sacred weapon like this? Just thinking about it was infuriating. The little stoic harumphed and haughtily muttered, "That's because it has extremely poor taste." Everyone hastily nodded and repeatedly criticized, "Right, extremely poor taste. This unlucky child. I'll beat it up every time I see it until it doesn't dare to speak carelessly." Arbor swept them a glance and did her best to keep her stoic face taut. She swiped her hand and took out a sparkling and translucent soul bead from her storage talisman. Ancient Emolien's half-wisp of soul suddenly turned into a soul bead for some reason that day. Arbor pushed the soul bead to Emolien and said seriously, "I wonder if it has anything to do with the danger you encountered." The soul bead was enveloped in an aqua-blue halo and emitted a faint luster. Ancient Emolien really did have half a wisp of soul wandering outside? He really didn't know about it. Now that he thought about it, no wonder he felt that the inheritance was a bit fragmented. It was probably missing this piece. In the past, he had inherited an incomplete legacy, so it was no wonder that cultivating it was more exhausting. If he were to absorb this soul orb in the future, he would be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort in his cultivation. He wouldn't need to spend a large amount of energy to research the inheritance, and he wouldn't need to go into seclusion for long periods of time and separate from his wife. Mo Lien's eyes lit up and she nodded repeatedly. Just as her finger was about to touch the soul bead, suddenly, a furry face suddenly turned upside down and appeared between the two of them. It was actually a monkey hanging upside down from the treetop. While the two of them were stunned, they saw the monkey's hairy arms swing and snatch the soul bead suspended in the middle with an extremely fast technique. It opened its mouth and was about to suck the soul bead in. Emolien's eyes turned cold. She immediately moved to stop him. In the blink of an eye, Jojo's startled swan dagger flew towards the monkey and nailed one of its arms to the tree trunk. Originally, this monkey had wanted to escape after snatching the soul bead. Now that it was pinned to the tree, it naturally could not go anywhere. What's that sound? The saint snake suddenly raised its head to look. Eagles flew in from all directions, and some of the small animals hidden in the garden were also moving. Even the surrounding vegetation was growing wildly, and branches were entwining towards them. Arbor made a prompt decision and hurriedly pulled Mo Lien and the others into the star domain. At the same time, two sharp-eyed goshawks descended from the sky. They raised their heads and looked around. The commotion alarmed the imperial guards guarding the Azure Palace, and they all rushed over. Mo Lien held the soul bead and exchanged a glance with Arbor. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.